How do you keep going when the one thing that kept you alive is suddenly gone? Ryan had faced countless battles, but none were as brutal as the loss of Ace, his loyal K9 partner. The one who had fought beside him through the worst of times, always ready to sacrifice for him. Now, with Ace gone, Ryan was left in a silence so heavy it felt like the weight of the world. How could he survive this loss? But in that crushing grief, he realized something. Ace's love and loyalty would always be with him, guiding him through the pain. The sky was clear and bright on a summer morning at the VA hospital in Greenfield. Jack Thompson stepped out of his police car, his military uniform sticking to his body from the scorching heat. Beneath the harsh sunlight, the hospital parking lot was empty, the only sounds being the hum of insects and the steady footsteps of Jack and his K9 partner Lulu, walking silently beside him. Jack was a man of few words, always keeping a certain distance from others. After leaving the military, he didn't choose a peaceful life. Instead, he joined the police force, wanting to continue serving the community, to protect those who needed it. For the past 3 years, Lulu, a smart and loyal German shepherd, had been his only companion. She wasn't just a partner, but a crucial part of his work. Together they had faced countless challenges, from intense training sessions to real-life missions that required perfect coordination. With her sleek black and tan coat, bright, sharp eyes, Lulu had proven to be an exceptional K9. Always alert, always focused, her intelligence was a hallmark of the breed. Jack had learned so much from her, not just as a reliable friend, but as an outstanding team member. The VA hospital was vast, a place where veterans came to heal both their physical and mental wounds. Jack's footsteps echoed steadily across the cold stone of the parking lot, but the air around them remained heavy with heat. Old cars, empty benches, all creating a quiet, sorrowful space. Every vehicle here carried the story of a soldier who had fought in brutal wars, now seeking solace in a place to heal. Lulu walked calmly beside Jack, every step of hers measured, full of alertness. Without needing words, Jack felt the bond between them. Lulu had been by his side through countless missions and challenges. In her eyes, Jack always found complete trust, and sometimes that was all he needed, an unspoken connection, built on trust, loyalty, and unconditional friendship. The two made their way toward the main part of the hospital. Everything seemed quiet, just the sound of cars passing by outside and a soft breeze brushing through. Today felt like another ordinary day in their work, but there was an odd feeling in the air, as if something was waiting for them ahead. As they continued along the row of parked cars, Jack began to sense that the quiet around them wasn't quite right. The cars all seemed the same, nothing out of the ordinary. But when they reached an old Ford F-150 parked near the end of the lot, Lulu suddenly stopped. Jack bent down slightly, following Lulu's gaze. The old Ford F-150 didn't seem like anything out of the ordinary. Still, Lulu stood still, not the least bit curious as she usually was when checking out parked cars. Her ears were fully alert, pointing toward the truck, her body straight as a line, a clear sign that something had caught her attention, something beyond the ordinary. Jack knew that when Lulu behaved like this, there was definitely something his eyes couldn't see. He tried to command her, his voice even. "Lulu, let's go." But she didn't move. The K9 stood frozen, her eyes fixed on the truck as if she could see right through it. Jack called out again, firmer this time, "Lulu, go!" But still no response. The silence around them was thick, broken only by the distant hum of engines. Jack could feel the tension in the air. It was different from their usual checks. There was something strange here, something Jack couldn't explain with logic alone. Lulu remained unmoving, her focus unwavering. Jack started to feel a slight pang of unease creep into his chest. Sometimes, feelings like this were signs of something dangerous ahead. He paused, studying the old truck more carefully. Aside from the thick layer of dust, nothing seemed unusual, but Lulu's behavior couldn't be ignored. He tugged on Lulu's leash, but she stood firm, refusing to budge. The tension in Jack's chest deepened. He knew Lulu well enough to trust her instincts, and her alertness meant something wasn't right with this vehicle. Something was hiding here. With an instinct he couldn't quite explain, Jack made the decision to act. He couldn't ignore Lulu's strong reaction, a clear indication that there was something he hadn't noticed yet. He carefully moved toward the truck, keeping an eye on Lulu's every move. Slowly, he pulled on the door handle, then leaned in to peek through the window. Inside, nothing seemed out of place. Yet, Jack's unease didn't fade. Lulu still sat upright, eyes never leaving the truck, as if there was something she sensed that he couldn't see. "Lulu," Jack whispered, gently stroking her head. But Lulu didn't move, her posture unchanging, adding to Jack's growing concern. There was an uneasiness, a feeling he couldn't explain, like danger was lurking just out of sight. Jack decided to inspect the truck more thoroughly, unable to shake the nagging feeling Lulu had planted in him. He crouched down and started checking the exterior of the vehicle. The windows were fogged with dust, and the truck had scratches and stains from years of use. Nothing stood out except its old, weathered appearance. But the strange feeling still lingered. Jack opened the door slowly, trying not to make a sound. His hands were careful as he pulled the door open and stepped inside, scanning the interior. At first glance, the truck's cabin was nothing more than a few normal items: an old military backpack, an aluminum water bottle, and some miscellaneous belongings. Nothing suspicious, but something in Jack's gut told him there was something hidden inside this truck. The light from the flashlight illuminated the area beneath the passenger seat. And then, the beam reflected off something unusual. It wasn't a large object, but it was enough to catch Jack's attention. He moved in closer, the light shining brighter, and there, hidden beneath the seat, was a small box. With a mix of curiosity and caution, Jack pulled the box out. It was old, its surface worn down by time. The box was sealed shut, with no markings to suggest anything special inside, but Jack could feel a strange tension emanating from it. Slowly, he opened the lid, and what he found inside made his heart skip a beat. The box contained a few items, neatly arranged, yet each one carried a weight, as if they held an entire story within them. A folded American flag, faded with age, but still holding a sense of dignity and reverence. Next to the flag were a pair of worn combat gloves, their fabric frayed and stained, the unmistakable marks of battles they had witnessed. These gloves seemed to still carry the weight of painful moments, where soldiers placed their trust not only in each other, but in their canine partners as well. There were also several old photographs in the box, perhaps of the truck's owner and his canine companion. The photos were blurred, but Jack could still make out the image of a canine dog with a soldier. The dog looked very much like Lulu, a German shepherd. These faded photos held a deep, sorrowful story of sacrifice and loyalty. Jack suddenly realized that this wasn't just some old truck. It might have belonged to a veteran who had lost his canine companion. A bond that could never be broken, filled with grief and longing. As Jack held the items in his hands, a wave of emotion swept over him. These weren't just inanimate objects. They were pieces of a story about sacrifice and friendship between humans and their canine partners. He felt his throat tighten, and a part of him wanted to know more about the soldier behind these belongings, the story hidden in them. Jack realized that this truck wasn't just an old vehicle. The items inside this box weren't just relics of a soldier's past. They were living witnesses to the loss they had endured. The feeling that something significant was being overlooked began to consume him, and he knew he had to find out more about the truck and its owner. This wasn't just another routine check. It felt like a story far deeper, one that he needed to understand. To do so, Jack headed back to the VA hospital, the place where he regularly conducted security checks. Each visit to the hospital filled him with a sense of peace, but there was always something heavy in the air. The VA hospital wasn't just a medical facility, it was a sanctuary for veterans, a place where they could seek help for both their physical and emotional scars. It was a place filled with thousands of stories of sacrifice, of those who had endured the horrors of war and carried the invisible wounds with them. The hospital's parking lot hadn't changed much, but today, Jack felt like something was different. Perhaps it was the story of the old truck and the items in the box that had made him reflect more on the sacrifices of soldiers and their K9s. As he entered the main area of the hospital, he spotted a few veterans sitting on benches, talking quietly with each other, their silence speaking volumes. One of the veterans, a man with silver hair and deep, wise eyes, leaned on his cane as he looked up at Jack with a familiar gaze. He smiled gently when he recognized Jack and Lulu, then spoke softly. "Hey there, Jack." "And Lulu, right? Good to see you. You've found your kids, huh?" Jack smiled back and nodded, but his eyes continued to scan the room, absorbing the quiet stories, the memories hanging thick in the air. A few others began to share their own tales, stories of their canine companions who had stood by their side in battle. "Do you remember Rocky?" another veteran asked, someone Jack knew had served in special forces. "Rocky was an amazing canine. He saved my life in Iraq. I remember it like it was yesterday. After everyone else was gone, it was just me and Rocky left. He dragged me out of the rubble, even though his own leg was badly hurt. I owe him my life." The soldier's story made Jack's throat tighten. Every story he heard was filled with silent sacrifice, the absolute loyalty these K9s had for their handlers. Sometimes soldiers didn't just fight for their country. They fought for those wordless companions who understood them better than anyone, even without speaking. In those stories, Jack saw empathy, unconditional friendship, and the infinite sacrifice between soldiers and their K9s. These men didn't just carry physical wounds, they carried the deep sorrow of the friends they had lost, the loyal dogs who never made it back. These stories, though short-lived, were a vital part of their lives. Jack felt his heart grow heavy. He looked at Lulu, the dog who always stood beside him. What Lulu had been through, the dangers they'd faced together, made him think more about the loyalty of K9s. Lulu wasn't just a dog, she was a constant, a loyal friend who never left his side. As Jack listened to the next stories, his mind kept drifting back to the old truck and the items in the box. Each of those items was a witness to the sacrifice of a soldier and their K9 companion. He couldn't just leave it there. Jack knew he had to learn more about the truck's owner, about the story behind those items. The VA hospital continued its everyday rhythm. But for Jack, today felt different. The stories of sacrifice, of these loyal K9 friends, drove him to keep digging, to uncover the untold secrets. In his heart, a decision had already been made. He would investigate more about the truck, about Ryan Davis, and about Ace, the K9 who had sacrificed so much. But before diving into that, Jack couldn't stop thinking about the stories he'd just heard from the veterans. Every tale of a K9 sacrifice left a deep impression on him, further deepening his respect and sense of responsibility for the work he did. One veteran Jack spoke with, a man named Harry, began to tell him about his own K9 companion, a dog named Max. Max wasn't just a dog, he was the only friend Harry could trust in the most dangerous situations. "Max saved me so many times," Harry's voice caught as he remembered the memories with his dog. "In a battle in Afghanistan, I got trapped in the rubble. Max found me when I couldn't move. He pulled me out with his mouth, even though his own leg was injured. The VA hospital, like Harry, was filled with veterans, each carrying their own story about the K9S who had saved their lives. These dogs weren't just companions, they were true warriors, brave and never abandoning their handlers. They never back down, another veteran, John, added, his eyes drifting to an old photo of a fallen K9. They're real soldiers. No matter the danger, they never run. They can't speak, but they understand everything. John's words hit Jack like a jolt. Canines, with their loyalty and intelligence, truly were steadfast companions, not just in work, but in life and death battles. It made Jack appreciate Lulu even more, the dog who had never left his side through the toughest missions. Jack looked at Lulu, and in that moment he felt the deep bond between them. Lulu wasn't just a working dog. She was a real friend who had stood by him through countless trials. The stories Jack had heard today about the brave K9s made him feel even more responsible for Lulu, not just in his work, but in life. That sense of responsibility grew stronger as he remembered what had happened to Ace, Ryan Davis's K9. Working with Lulu for the past 3 years, Jack had come to understand the sacrifices K9s made for their soldiers. Every dog had a significant role in the life of their handler. Jack could feel the pain, not just of the veterans, but of the invisible loss every soldier carries. The stories he had heard at the VA weren't just memories of fallen K9S. They were fragments of lives that could never be fully reclaimed. The loss of a loyal companion could never be replaced by anything. As Jack was deep in thought, his mind returned to the old truck he'd found in the parking lot. The truck wasn't just any vehicle. The items in that box weren't just relics of a soldier. They were living witnesses to the sacrifices they had made. The American flag, the worn combat gloves, the faded photos, they all told an untold story about a soldier and his K9 companion. Jack couldn't ignore the feeling stirring inside him. He knew the truck and its contents were likely connected to Ryan Davis, the owner who had lost his K9. Jack felt a deep connection to Ryan's story, a man who had endured such great loss. He knew he had to do something to help. He couldn't just stand by and do nothing. Jack looked at Lulu, the K9 companion who had been by his side all these years. Lulu stood there calmly as usual, but her eyes seemed to convey a message Jack couldn't ignore. Lulu had always been the best friend Jack had ever had. Every time he looked into her eyes, he felt the loyalty, the unconditional love she had for him. Jack knew that if any dog could understand the pain and loss Ryan was feeling, it was Lulu. Jack knew, without a doubt, that once he met Ryan, he would find a way to help him, whether through words or just by having Lulu there. He felt that it wasn't only him who could help, but that Lulu also had a role to play in helping Ryan heal from the unresolved pain. His mind was swirling with thoughts, but one thing was clear. He had to act. Jack decided to dig deeper into Ryan Davis's story, to understand more about Ace, the fallen companion. It wasn't just a matter of duty for him. It was something deeper, the unbreakable bond between a man and his K9 partner. Jack was determined to find Ryan and learn more about his story. He couldn't sit idly by while these stories passed him without taking action. Ryan and Ace's loss wasn't just their own story. It was the story of all the soldiers and K9s who had sacrificed so much. Jack knew that he had to stand up, to bridge the gap between the past and the future, to help Ryan find peace within himself, while also understanding more deeply the sacrifices and unconditional friendships that K9s brought to their handlers. As night fell, Jack felt an eerie stillness in the air. He had made his decision. Tomorrow he would begin his journey, to find Ryan, to find Ace, and to uncover a way to ease the pain both Ryan and he had carried. Jack woke up earlier than usual. His thoughts about the old Ford F-150 truck still lingered in his mind. How could such an ordinary truck hold so many secrets? The items in the small box, the American flag, the worn combat gloves, the faded photos. They were all witnesses to the sacrifice that Ryan Davis, the truck's owner, had endured. Jack knew that finding the owner of this truck was important, and he decided not to waste any more time. He sat down at his desk, opened his laptop, and started researching information about the truck. The registration number, the color, the make, everything was recorded in the system. Within minutes, the details of the Ford F-150 appeared on the screen. The truck belonged to Ryan Davis, a retired Navy SEAL who had served in the military for years and now lived in a suburb of Greenfield. Jack couldn't help but feel a shock upon learning that Ryan was a Special Forces veteran, someone who had fought in some of the toughest battles. Jack continued his research into Ryan Davis and discovered that he had trained and worked alongside Ace, a courageous K9. Ace wasn't just a smart working dog. He had been Ryan's indispensable companion in combat. Together, they had faced countless challenges, and Ace had saved Ryan's life in many dangerous situations. As Jack read through the descriptions of Ace, he felt deeply moved. What Ace had done for Ryan wasn't just a job. It was life-saving action, the sacrifice of a loyal friend without a single word. Jack paused for a moment, thinking about everything Ace had been through. As someone who worked with K9S, Jack understood well the importance of these companions. He and Lulu had faced many challenges together, but not everyone was fortunate enough to have a friend like Ace. The more he uncovered, the more Jack learned that Ryan had been profoundly affected after losing Ace. There weren't many details about Ace's death, but one thing was clear. Ryan hadn't just lost a working partner. He had lost a vital part of himself. In Ryan's life, Ace had been the one and only companion he fully trusted, the friend who never left his side, even in the hardest moments. The more Jack learned about Ryan and Ace, the deeper the connection he felt between them. What Ryan had gone through wasn't something any ordinary person could easily overcome. Jack knew that he had to find Ryan and help him face the pain he had buried for far too long. With this resolve in his heart, Jack decided to meet Ryan. He wanted to uncover the story behind the truck, the items in the box, and, most importantly, he wanted to help Ryan confront his past. Veterans, those who had witnessed and lived through war, often carried invisible scars that no one could truly understand. But Jack, with all that he had experienced alongside Lulu, believed that he could help Ryan find some peace within himself. Jack grabbed his phone and dialed Ryan Davis's number. After a few rings, a deep voice answered on the other end. "Hello, this is Jack Thompson, K9 officer. I'd like to talk to you about your truck." There was a pause, and then Ryan responded. "Do I know you?" "Yes, I saw your truck and wanted to ask about some items inside. Could we meet?" Another silence followed, before Ryan replied, "Okay, I'll meet you." "I'm at home. Come on over." Jack felt his heart race a little, but he stayed calm. This wasn't just another routine call. There was something deeper pulling him closer to Ryan's story. Jack drove to Ryan's address, the surroundings growing quieter the closer he got, as if something strange awaited him ahead. When Jack arrived at Ryan's home, the simplicity of the house struck him. There was nothing flashy or grand, just a small, worn house that felt warm, much like Ryan himself. Jack parked, took a deep breath, and prepared for what was to come. When he knocked on the door, it opened a few seconds later to reveal a middle-aged man with tanned skin and tired eyes. Ryan stood there in simple clothes, a faded t-shirt, worn jeans, and old boots. There was nothing imposing about him, just a quiet wariness in his gaze. "Hello?" Ryan said, his eyes lingering on Jack for a moment longer, as if sizing him up, deciding whether or not he could trust him. "Hello, I'm Jack Thompson," Jack said, his voice steady. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." Ryan looked at Jack, tilting his head slightly, as if trying to decide whether or not he recognized him. He didn't respond right away, just stood still for a moment before finally stepping aside and gesturing for Jack to come in. "Come in," Ryan said softly, opening the door wider. Jack stepped inside. The house felt a little cluttered but warm and inviting. Family photos lined the walls, and an old armchair sat near the window. Ryan pointed to a sofa nearby. "Have a seat," Ryan said before sitting down across from him. Jack sat, taking in the quiet simplicity of the room. There wasn't anything particularly special about it, just a peaceful, everyday space. But then, Jack noticed an old photo frame on the table, with a picture of a canine dog. He smiled faintly and looked up at Ryan. "This is Ace, isn't it?" Jack asked, his voice soft. Ryan gazed at the photo for a moment, then nodded. His eyes seemed to cloud over, a wave of emotion rising just beneath the surface. "Yeah," Ryan replied, his voice dropping lower. "Ace was one of my best friends. He wasn't just a dog. He was the only friend I had throughout the years of war." Jack could feel the weight in Ryan's words. He waited patiently, giving Ryan the time he needed to continue. Not pushing, just listening. Ryan took a deep breath before speaking again. "We fought together for 3 years. He was always by my side, in every battle, in every dangerous moment. I remember one time, I was injured and trapped in rubble. Ace was the first to find me. He pulled me out, even though his own leg was hurt. He never left me, even though he knew he might not make it back." Jack didn't say anything, just sat quietly, listening. Ryan went on. "One day, during a bombing in Afghanistan, I was close to Ace. A bomb went off, and he rushed in to shield me. He sacrificed himself so I could live." Ryan's voice caught in his throat as he recalled that moment. Jack could feel his own heart tighten. He could see the pain in Ryan's eyes, the kind of pain soldiers carry when they lose their invaluable companions. "We made it through everything together, but in the end, Ace couldn't survive that blast," Ryan said, his hand clenching into a fist. "Losing Ace, I didn't just lose a friend. I lost a part of my life." Ryan's story left Jack feeling choked up. Each word carried the weight of grief, not just for Ace's sacrifice, but for the struggles Ryan had faced after leaving the military. Jack could feel the deep sadness in Ryan's eyes, a sorrow many veterans carry with them every day, but few ever truly understand. Ryan sat in silence for a moment, as if lost in the memories. Then, he spoke again, his voice quieter this time. "After Ace died, I couldn't find a purpose anymore. When I was in the military, I had one reason to keep going, to protect my teammates and complete the mission. But when I came back, I didn't know what to do. I couldn't find that feeling again. No reason to keep going except to survive." Jack sat still, watching Ryan, understanding that this was the moment Ryan was opening up. This wasn't just about a lost K9. It was about a soldier trying to find a reason to keep living after everything had changed forever. "Do you feel like you've lost a part of yourself?" Jack asked gently, trying not to push Ryan too hard, but wanting him to speak about the difficult emotions buried inside. Ryan nodded, his eyes filled with sorrow. "Yeah, Ace wasn't just a dog. He was the only friend I could trust in every situation. He knew when I was in danger, when I needed help. I couldn't find that in anyone else." Jack could feel the weight of the silence between them. This story wasn't just about a fallen dog. It was about a soldier who had lost an irreplaceable part of his life, a part that only Ace could fill. Jack thought about Lulu, the dog who had always been by his side. While he knew nothing could replace Ace, Lulu's loyalty and unconditional friendship made him understand, on a deeper level, what Ryan was feeling. "Do you think keeping all the memories of Ace helps you hold on to what's important?" Jack asked, hoping to help Ryan realize that sometimes keeping painful memories locked inside only makes the burden heavier. Ryan sighed and looked down at his hands. "I don't know. The memories of Ace are always there. Every time I close my eyes, I can see him clearly. But I always feel like I'm carrying a weight I can't put down. I've never talked about Ace with anyone. I don't want people to see me as weak." Jack spoke softly, his words full of understanding. "I get it. But keeping that pain inside only makes it grow, and eventually it'll take over your life." There was a pause, and Jack added gently, "You can share it. No one will judge you. That's what Ace would want, right?" Ryan looked at Jack, as if searching for some truth in his words. After a long moment, he spoke. "I think you're right. I need to talk about it. I need to let it out, instead of keeping it all bottled up." His voice was softer now, more tender. Jack nodded, but he knew this was only the beginning. "So, are you ready to face it?" Jack asked, his voice encouraging but sincere. Ryan was silent for a moment, his gaze drifting to the old pictures on the table. After what seemed like forever, he answered, "I think I'm ready. Maybe not right now, but I'll try. I think it's time I faced this pain." Jack gave him a small, gentle smile. "You don't have to do this alone. Lulu and I will be here." Ryan looked at Jack, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Jack. I'll try. It's been so long since I've lived in the darkness of my own mind." "You're not alone, Ryan," Jack said, his voice calm. "We all have our warrior companions, and sometimes our canine friends don't just help us in war, they help us find ourselves." Jack's words lingered in the air, like an unspoken promise, a bond forming between the two men, two companions. Ryan took a deep breath, a soft sigh of relief escaping him, as though a part of him had finally loosened. "Thank you, Jack," Ryan said, his voice much softer now. "Thank you for helping me realize that I need to change." Jack smiled, feeling a warm sense of peace in his chest. He knew that today, a small step had been taken. The next step, Ryan would have to face the memories deep within himself, the memories of Ace, the loyal companion who had sacrificed everything. But the first step had been made. Ryan had opened up. After their conversation, Ryan decided to join the therapy group at the VA hospital. The sessions with the therapists wouldn't be easy, but Jack knew it was the only way for Ryan to begin healing. Soldiers often didn't want to face the invisible scars they carried, but Ryan was ready to start that journey. With Lulu by his side, Jack took Ryan to the therapy room. As they entered, the atmosphere in the room was filled with stillness and peace, a sharp contrast to the intense training Ryan had gone through. Other veterans were already seated, each with their own story to share, but no one was in a rush. This was a space for them to release their unspoken pain. "Hello, everyone," Ryan said in a low voice, trying to mask his nervousness. "I'm Ryan. This is my first time in this group." The others smiled and nodded in welcome. Jack stood outside, giving Ryan space. Lulu sat beside him, her eyes bright with empathy. Jack knew that even without saying a word, Lulu's presence was the greatest emotional support for Ryan. The therapy session began, and Ryan slowly opened up more. He shared about his days in Afghanistan, the battles he and Ace had fought together, and the unforgettable moments when Ace had saved his life. But when he started speaking about Ace's death, his voice caught. "Losing Ace wasn't easy," Ryan began, his hands tightening into fists. "In those final days, we fought side by side like we always did. But in that bombing, Ace was the one between me and the bomb. He protected me and he didn't make it. I can't forgive myself for letting him sacrifice." Every word Ryan spoke felt like a blade cutting into his soul. The memories of Ace weren't sweet ones. They were filled with pain. Silent tears fell, but Ryan tried to hold them back. He didn't want to appear weak in front of the others, but Jack knew that this was a crucial step in Ryan's healing journey. Ryan looked down at his hands, his eyes clouding over. "He was the only friend I had." His voice cracked, barely above a whisper. "We didn't have anyone else. After Ace died, I lost a part of myself." Jack stood outside the room, listening to Ryan's words through the glass. He could feel the pain and loss Ryan was going through. The memories of Ace, though painful, were necessary for Ryan's healing. Jack knew the next step for Ryan was to face those memories. No more running away. Inside the therapy room, one of the specialists, Dr. Linda, spoke gently. "Ryan, what you've shared is a big step. Facing the pain is part of the healing process. Ace was a great friend to you, and you were a great friend to him. But to move forward, you'll need to learn to live with those memories." Ryan sat in silence, not answering right away. His eyes remained fixed on his hands, as though searching for an answer. It was a painful confrontation with the past, but he knew that if he didn't face it, he wouldn't be able to move forward. "You don't have to do this alone," Jack said softly through the glass, then entered the room. "Lulu and I will be here." Ryan turned to Jack, his eyes full of gratitude but also tinged with worry. "I don't know if I can do this, but I'll try. I can't keep running." Jack smiled and stepped closer, resting a hand gently on Ryan's shoulder. "Starting is enough. We'll get through it together." Ryan took a deep breath, his eyes meeting Jack's, and then drifting to Lulu before returning to the therapy group. Part of him still hesitated, but the pain had lasted far too long. He knew now was the time to face the truth, not just to heal for himself, but to heal the memories that had haunted him for years. The others in the group had all faced their own losses. They were soldiers, veterans, and they understood the pain Ryan was carrying. Dr. Linda spoke again, her voice soft and inviting. "Ryan, you've done a great job just by being here. Now it's time to share your story, if you're ready." Ryan looked around the room at the old soldiers and their companions. They were all looking at him with eyes full of empathy. No one judged him, only understanding and open ears. He felt a part of him was freed when he realized he didn't have to face this pain alone. I don't know where to start," Ryan said, his voice faltering. "I thought I would never be able to talk about Ace, but today, I feel like I have to. I can't keep it inside anymore." A few seconds of silence passed. Ryan looked down at his hands, his fingers tightening, as if trying to find some anchor within himself. Then, slowly, he began to speak, his words coming one by one. "Ace was a K9 I trained," Ryan said, his voice thick with emotion. "He was unlike any other dog. He was the only companion I had. We fought together, protected each other through countless battles. Ace wasn't just a dog. He was a warrior, the friend I trusted most. I remember the first time I met him, his eyes locked on mine, full of determination, and I knew right away that I could trust him." Ryan paused for a moment, his gaze distant, as though he was reliving the days he fought alongside Ace. His voice faltered as he continued, growing more choked with emotion. "But then one day, we were in that bombing. I got trapped, and Ace was the one who saved me." He didn't hesitate. "When the bomb went off, I saw him charge towards me, like he knew it would be the last time he did that. He sacrificed himself to save me, and I can't forgive myself for not protecting him." Ryan's eyes began to cloud, his voice strained. "I don't know what to do with this feeling. I thought I had to keep living with it, but it only gets heavier. Losing Ace, it feels like I lost a part of myself." The room fell silent as Ryan spoke, but everyone in the therapy group could feel the raw pain in his words. This was the first time he had opened up about Ace's sacrifice, the first time he admitted that he couldn't carry this pain on his own. Dr. Linda's gentle voice broke the silence. Thank you, Ryan. You've shared something very important. Facing the pain and sharing it is the first step towards healing. You are not alone, and we will walk with you. Jack stood outside, quietly observing. He knew today was a significant day for Ryan. What he shared wasn't just the story of a fallen K9, but an acknowledgement of the invisible wounds he had carried for so long. Ryan wasn't just freeing himself from the pain of the past. He was opening up an opportunity to heal those wounds. Ryan lifted his head, his eyes a little brighter now, as if a part of him had been freed. "Thank you, everyone," he said, his voice soft but filled with gratitude. "I know I need to keep going, and I will try, but I can't do it alone. Thank you for helping me realize that I'm not facing this alone." Jack smiled, his eyes full of encouragement. He knew a significant step had been taken. Ryan had opened up, confronted the painful memories of Ace, and no longer kept his emotions hidden. For Jack, this wasn't just an important moment for Ryan, but a sign that he was beginning a new journey, a journey of healing and finding peace within himself. Ryan sat quietly for a moment, his eyes gazing out the window where the sunlight poured into the room. In the stillness, he felt a strange relief, one he hadn't been able to find in years. Jack's words, the support from the therapy group, and especially confronting Ace's sacrifice, had marked a turning point in his journey. "I feel a lot lighter," Ryan sighed, but this time his voice wasn't as heavy as before. "For years, I kept it all inside, didn't want anyone to see me as weak. But today, I realize I can't keep going like this anymore," Ryan said, his voice soft but steady. "I have to learn to live with those memories, instead of trying to run from them." Jack looked at Ryan, nodding with an encouraging look, but not saying anything. He knew Ryan was still wrestling with his thoughts, but at least now he had dared to face the memories he'd buried for so long. "You can start again," Jack said, his voice firm but gentle. "Facing the pain is part of the healing process, and you don't have to do this alone." Ryan bit his lip, his eyes brightening as if something important had clicked inside him. He didn't speak, only nodded slightly, then continued to gaze ahead, where the sky outside the window had begun to turn orange as the sunset settled in. A quiet pause passed between them. Then Ryan spoke, his voice full of contemplation. "I think I'm ready. I don't want to carry this pain with me for the rest of my life. Ace sacrificed for me. I can't let it become a burden in my life." He paused for a moment, his eyes dropping to his hands. "He's a part of me, and I have to live with that memory." Jack sat across from Ryan, a deep respect in his gaze. "You don't need to feel guilty for loving a friend like Ace. Not everyone gets to have a friend as loyal as that. We can learn to live with the memories without letting them control us." Ryan smiled faintly, but his eyes remained tinged with sadness. "Thank you, Jack. Thank you for always being here. I don't know where I'd be without your help. Maybe now I'll try again, face what's behind me. I won't hide it anymore. Ace isn't something I can just throw away. He's always here, in my heart." Jack sat silently, watching Ryan. It wasn't a quick word of encouragement, but the quiet presence of a companion who understood that a big step had been taken. Ryan had made his decision. He could no longer hide, and that was the strongest choice he had ever made. "The first step is done," Jack said softly, "and the next step is moving forward with those memories. Ace will always be with you, but now you'll live without it tormenting you. That's how we honor those friends who sacrificed for us." Ryan looked at Jack, then smiled gently, this time with a real smile. "Then, I'll live with Ace's memory. Thank you for helping me see all of this." A sense of relief spread through Ryan, and with every word he shared, he realized he no longer had to carry that pain alone. The next step was walking on a healthier path, the path where he would find peace in his heart, with Ace's memories beside him. And Jack, his companion, had helped him understand that not all wounds had to be hidden. Jack stood up, extending his hand toward Ryan, not to comfort or protect, but to walk beside him, as a true friend. "Let's walk this road together, Ryan," Jack said, his gaze filled with determination. "We'll keep moving forward, together." Ryan didn't say anything, but he gently took Jack's hand, feeling the warmth and steadiness his companion offered. He nodded softly, as if silently saying he was ready to continue, no longer carrying everything alone. As they sat down on the chairs opposite each other, the air around them was still. But this time, there was no tension or exhaustion. Ryan let out a deep sigh, his shoulders relaxing as he began to speak, his voice slow and filled with emotion. "I've never told anyone about Ace, except for myself," Ryan began, his voice heavy. "But today I feel like I need to say it. Ace wasn't just any dog. He was a warrior. He was my only companion through the years of war. No one understood me like Ace did." Jack remained silent, listening intently to every word Ryan spoke. He could feel the pain in Ryan's voice, as if he was struggling to keep buried emotions from spilling over. Ryan continued, his eyes seemingly lost in the past, where Ace still existed in every memory. "The first time I met Ace was when I was assigned to train him," Ryan recalled, his hands clenching as if trying to hold on to every detail of the memory. "When Ace and I went into our first battle, he was just a puppy, but he showed me courage like no other. People thought of dogs as tools, but Ace proved he was a true warrior." Ryan took a deep breath, his voice catching for a moment, but he pushed forward, continuing the story. "There was one time we were ambushed in a minefield. I got trapped in some rubble, unable to move. Ace didn't hesitate. He rushed in, just hearing me call his name. He didn't care about the mines, the danger around us. He rushed in and pulled me out, even though he was hurt, too." Ryan paused for a moment, his eyes distant, as if reliving that moment. Jack could see the pain in Ryan's words, the kind of grief that could never be fully understood unless you had experienced it yourself. Ryan continued, but his voice was now filled with emotion, as though the memories were suffocating him. "Ace didn't save me just once," Ryan said, his voice shaking. "He saved my life countless times. But when that bomb went off, I couldn't save him. I was only a few meters away from Ace. He looked at me one last time, then ran toward me, putting himself between me and the bomb. He died instantly. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't save him. And since then, I've thought that if it weren't for me, Ace would still be alive." Ryan's voice broke completely, and Jack could see the tears beginning to fall on Ryan's face. Jack felt the agony deep within Ryan's heart. It wasn't just the sorrow for Ace's sacrifice, but the profound sadness of being unable to protect the loyal friend who had saved him. "Ace was the only friend I had," Ryan choked out. "He was everything. He stood by me through so many battles, through so many hardships. Losing Ace, I lost a part of myself." Jack sat quietly, not saying anything. He understood that Ryan's words weren't just about a dog who sacrificed his life. They were a confession of the pain Ryan had carried deep within. The sacrifice of Ace wasn't just the loss of a dog, it was the loss of an irreplaceable part of Ryan himself. Ryan looked up at Jack, and for the first time in many years, he didn't feel ashamed of his pain. He no longer had to hide his feelings or feel guilty for loving Ace too much. "Thank you, Jack," Ryan said, his voice softer now, yet still filled with emotion. "Thank you for helping me see everything clearly, for helping me share my story." Jack sat quietly, listening to every word. He could tell that Ryan's thanks weren't just words of gratitude, but a crucial first step in the healing journey he was beginning. Sharing the story of Ace had lightened Ryan's heart, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. Yet Jack understood that the road ahead was still long. Confronting pain was never easy, but Ryan had opened up, and that was the most important thing. "You did really well, Ryan," Jack said, his voice gentle. "Healing doesn't come from forgetting the pain, but from facing it. Sometimes confronting and accepting the losses is the only way to move forward." Ryan nodded, his eyes still wet, but there seemed to be a profound sense of relief beginning to fill his heart. The memories of Ace, though still there, no longer haunted him the way they once did. Speaking up and being heard had given him a freedom he hadn't known before. The guilt and fear of weakness were gradually fading away. "Thank you," Ryan continued. "I never thought sharing my story would help me like this. I thought that if I spoke about it, it would only hurt more. But strangely, I feel much lighter now." Jack smiled, meeting Ryan's gaze. "That's because you didn't let the pain control you anymore. You faced it, accepted it, and now it's no longer weighing on your heart." Ryan sat in silence for a moment, as if he had just stepped out of a long nightmare. He looked at his hands, then out the window, where the fading sunlight illuminated the clouds, signaling that peace was slowly returning. "Before I came here, I always felt like I was living in the past," Ryan said softly, as if speaking to himself. "But now I feel like I can live again, like a normal person. Every day I'll remember Ace, but I don't feel trapped by the past anymore." Jack looked at Ryan with a warm, encouraging gaze. "That's the first step, Ryan. You can't change the past, but you can choose to face it and live with it peacefully. Ace will always be in your heart, but you have to learn to live with those memories without letting them control your present." Ryan turned back to Jack, his eyes filled with appreciation and newfound resolve. "Thank you, Jack. I know there's still a lot to learn, but I'll start from here. I'll face the past and I'll keep moving forward." Jack smiled and stood up. "The important thing is that you've decided to move forward, Ryan. You won't have to do it alone anymore." As Ryan looked back at his memories of Ace, he no longer felt guilt or regret. Instead, he felt a deep sense of appreciation for the companion who had always stood by his side. Ace was gone, but the friendship and loyalty of that dog would forever remain in Ryan's heart and mind. Now, Ryan understood that the past wasn't something he needed to bury. It was an inseparable part of his life. He could carry it in his heart without suffering the pain. He had realized that in order to heal, he had to face the pain, accept the loss, and learn to live with those memories. He couldn't keep running from them. He needed to step out of the shadows of the past to move into the future. And to do that, he knew he had to accept help from those around him. "You've done really well, Ryan," Jack said, his voice gentle yet filled with encouragement. "But the next step is the most important. You don't have to do this alone. If you need us, we'll be here." Ryan looked at Jack, feeling the sincerity in his words. He hadn't faced his pain alone for all this time, and he didn't want to continue doing it alone. That feeling of having a companion by his side made Ryan realize he wasn't alone anymore. "Thank you, Jack," Ryan said, his voice stronger now. "I'm going to join the therapy group. I can't keep living like this. I'll learn to face the memories of Ace because I know that's the only way forward." Jack smiled, his eyes shining with pride. "That's a great decision, Ryan. Facing the past isn't easy, but it will help you find peace within. And Ace will always be with you, not just in memory, but in your heart." Ryan felt a part of him had been set free. He no longer felt afraid to think about the past, about the loss of Ace. Although the pain was still there, Ryan realized he no longer needed to run from it. Facing the past, sharing it, and learning to live with it was the way forward. He decided to join the therapy group at the VA hospital, where other veterans were also seeking healing. It was a big decision, but Ryan knew it was the first step toward continuing his life without being haunted by the past. Ace couldn't come back, But the healing journey would start with accepting that memory, allowing it to be a part of his story rather than a burden. The next day, Ryan went to the VA hospital with Jack. He felt a little nervous, but not as fearful as before. He walked into the therapy room, where other veterans were already seated. Each had their own story, and although no one spoke about it, there was a deep understanding between them. Dr. Linda, the therapist, greeted Ryan with a warm smile. "Hello, Ryan," she said gently. "We're so glad you're joining this therapy group. Today, if you'd like, we can begin by sharing our stories." Ryan looked at Jack, then nodded. He no longer felt guilty or afraid about sharing his story about Ace. "I'm ready," he said, his voice still a bit hesitant, but without the anxiety it once carried. "I'll share." Ryan began to speak about Ace, sharing the memories of their time together, the countless moments Ace had saved his life during the war, and the wordless bond they shared. When he spoke of the battle in Afghanistan, where Ace had sacrificed himself to protect him, he no longer felt weak. Instead, he felt his heart lighten. Finally, Ryan looked at the members of the group, his gaze calmer now, no longer burdened by the invisible scars on his soul. "Ace was the best friend I've ever had. He didn't just save me in battle. He saved me in life after the war, and now I'll live with his memory, not as a burden, but as a part of my life." Dr. Linda and the others in the group smiled. They understood that Ryan had crossed a significant threshold, a door opening to healing. His story wasn't just about loss, it was about friendship, loyalty, and the strength to face pain. Ryan no longer felt afraid to face the past. Each day, he felt stronger, daring to confront the memories of Ace that he had once avoided. Now, Ryan had decided to embrace the mementos Ace had left behind, items that seemed ordinary, but in reality held a deeply moving story of friendship and unconditional loyalty. In his small room, Ryan opened the cabinet where he knew he would find Ace's old belongings. The room wasn't large, but it was filled with memories. Ryan slowly pulled out Ace's training backpack, the gear they had both worn during their training sessions. It was an old combat uniform, faded from use, the seams of the backpack beginning to fray. Every time he looked at these items, Ryan was reminded of the intense training sessions, the times they both sweat and worked side by side. It had been a tough time, but it was also filled with unforgettable moments. Carefully, Ryan opened the backpack, and as if the past itself had guided him, he found an old photo of Ace tucked inside. The picture had faded with time, but still showed Ace in the early days of their combat days. Ace stood next to him, eyes bright, always ready for a command. Every time Ryan looked at this photo, he didn't just see a K9 dog, he saw a true warrior, the companion he trusted more than anyone. Placing the photo down on the table, Ryan continued his search in the cabinet. He pulled out a commemorative certificate, a gift the military had awarded to Ace after completing his duties. It was a certificate recognizing Ace's sacrifice and contribution during the campaigns in Afghanistan. Ryan gazed at the certificate, a feeling he couldn't quite put into words swelling within him. This was recognition for Ace, but for Ryan, it meant more. It was a confirmation that Ace wasn't just a dog, he was an irreplaceable part of his life. These items, though simple, held immense value. Each item Ryan found was a witness to Ace's sacrifice, a testament to the unbreakable bond between the two of them. Holding the backpack, the photo, and the certificate, Ryan felt the flood of memories of Ace come rushing back. He remembered the days spent fighting side by side, the tense moments when they faced danger, and the times Ace had pulled him from the rubble. Those memories made Ryan feel like he was reliving those challenging days once more. One thing Ryan realized as he looked at these items: holding on to these mementos wasn't just a way to remember Ace. It was also a way for him to face the truth that Ace would always be in his heart, a part of him that would never be forgotten. Ryan knew, even though Ace was no longer physically by his side, that the bond between them was eternal. It wasn't about loss. It was about the everlasting friendship Ace had given him. He carefully placed all the items on the table, and his gaze, no longer filled with the pain it once held, softened. There was a strange peace, as if he had finally found a part of himself he had been trying to hide for so long. He knew that, even though Ace was gone, those memories would never fade. And Ryan also understood that in order to heal, he had to continue living with those memories, letting Ace live on in his heart. He took a deep breath, then whispered softly, "Thank you, Ace," as if sending a heartfelt thanks to his companion. These items weren't just keepsakes. They were proof of friendship, loyalty, and sacrifice. Looking at the items in his hands, each piece of Ace's old gear carried an emotional story he could never forget. He remembered Ace's brave moments in the war, the times Ace saved him from rubble, the countless times Ace had warned and protected him from danger without hesitation. Those moments were now memories Ryan would carry with him always, not just because of Ace's sacrifice, but because of the unbreakable friendship they had shared. One memory Ryan would never forget was the bomb explosion in Afghanistan. As the team moved through a dangerous area, the ground suddenly shook, and a bomb went off nearby. Ace and Ryan were very close when the blast occurred. Ryan was thrown backward, a piece of debris hitting his leg. Despite being injured, Ace didn't hesitate. He charged toward Ryan immediately, pulling him out of the danger zone. In that moment, Ryan felt the unshakable courage of Ace, a bravery words couldn't describe. Even with injuries, Ace never gave up, never stopped protecting his partner. "Thank you, Ace," Ryan whispered again, this time as a late tribute. That was the first time in his life Ryan had truly understood what sacrifice meant. Without Ace, Ryan might not have survived. The next memory Ryan recalled was another time when he and Ace were patrolling through a smoke-filled area. The strong winds made the air heavy, and Ryan and Ace were leading the way, entering a dangerous territory they knew could be filled with mines. Suddenly, Ace stopped, his body stiff and alert. Ryan didn't understand why, but instinctively he froze, watching Ace closely. Then, through the thick dust, Ace crouched low, ready to protect. Ryan saw the buried landmine near their feet. Ace had detected it before Ryan could. Without Ace, they might have lost their lives in an instant. Ace's quick and decisive actions saved them both. This time, Ryan didn't just feel saved by a dog. He felt saved by a true friend, a companion who saved him not just with strength, but with intuition and unwavering loyalty. In other moments when Ryan was ambushed by hidden gunmen, Ace was always the one who charged in first to protect him. He never hesitated, always knowing when to act and always following orders quickly and accurately. Ryan would never forget the times he and Ace sat down after a battle, exhausted, but relieved. Ace would lie beside him, like a true friend, silent, just there, a loyal companion. As Ryan sat with Ace's memories in his hands, he realized that facing these memories was his way of honoring not just the sacrifices of Ace, but the enduring bond they had shared. Ace was no longer physically with him, but Ryan knew his friend would always be there, not as a burden, but as a part of his story, one that would forever shape who he was. Ryan looked at the mementos he had just found, and in that moment, he realized that Ace wasn't just a work companion. Ace had become an irreplaceable part of his life. Ryan had once thought he could never continue without Ace by his side, but now he understood that those memories, those keepsakes, would help him move forward, living with pride for everything Ace had done for him. "Ace, I'll never forget you," Ryan whispered, his gaze softening as though he were seeing his old friend one last time. "Thank you for everything you've done. You're a part of me, and you will always be in my heart." With these keepsakes, Ryan no longer felt the loss. These items were no longer just old belongings. They were living stories of the challenges he and Ace had overcome together. Without these mementos, the memories of Ace would have remained locked away in the dark corners of his heart, unprocessed and impossible to accept. Ryan sat down, gripping the items he had just uncovered: Ace's training gear, the old photo, and the commemorative certificate. Each of these objects was a piece of the puzzle that was his life, a life he couldn't forget, couldn't let go of. The heaviness in his heart slowly began to lift as he accepted that these memories were an important part of him. He no longer felt the pain the way he once did. Instead, these keepsakes had become reminders of unconditional friendship, of the sacrifice Ace had made for him. They were priceless gifts Ace had left behind, and Ryan would never forget them. A sense of relief spread through Ryan. He realized that facing the past and accepting Ace's sacrifice wasn't something to fear. On the contrary, it was the only way he could move forward without letting the pain control him. The memories of Ace were no longer a burden. They didn't make him feel guilty or painful whenever he recalled them. Instead, each memory of Ace was now a part of his life, a piece of moments he would forever cherish. Ace wasn't just a dog. He was a loyal companion, someone who had helped him through challenges that no one else could understand. Ace lived like a warrior, Ryan told himself, his eyes fixed on the old items. And I'll live like a warrior, carrying Ace's memory without letting it make me weak. Ryan felt ready. He no longer feared facing the past, nor did he feel the need to hide those memories. The memories of Ace would always live in his heart, but he wouldn't let them become a burden anymore. He would live with them as part of his life, not as something to be hidden away. He decided he would no longer keep it all inside. Ace did everything he could. Now I'll do everything I can. He looked at the items once more, then lifted his eyes to Lulu, the loyal companion who had been by his side throughout this entire journey. Lulu looked back at him, her gaze full of understanding, without needing to say a word. Ryan felt a warmth in his chest, realizing that even though Ace was gone, the love and loyalty Ace had shown would live on forever. Inside him, along with Lulu, his new companion always ready to share the burdens he carried in his heart. A while later, Ryan stood up, gently placing Ace's keepsakes into a neat box. He looked around the room, filled with memories. For the first time in many years, Ryan didn't feel alone. These keepsakes were no longer meaningless objects. They were vivid memories, part of his journey, and he knew that, in order to heal, he couldn't keep hiding these memories anymore. "Thank you, Ace," Ryan whispered, softly patting Lulu. "Thank you for everything you did. I won't let Ace become a burden anymore. I'll live with these memories as part of me." Jack stood quietly at the door, watching. He didn't say anything, but when he saw the calmness in Ryan's eyes, he knew this was an important step. Ryan wasn't the same anymore. He no longer carried the tension or avoided facing the past. He was ready to share his pain, and Lulu's presence during every therapy session had become an essential part of the healing process. Lulu, the canine Ryan trusted, had always been the companion by his side. She wasn't just a tool in his work, but a loyal friend who had been there with him through the hardest moments. Though Ryan didn't speak it, every time he looked into Lulu's understanding eyes, he felt a comfort that words could never express. During the therapy sessions, Ryan began to realize how essential Lulu's presence was. Lulu wasn't just a companion in his work. She had been with him through everything. In previous sessions, when Ryan attended therapy without Lulu, he felt lonely and shy. But this time, with Lulu beside him, everything felt a little easier. Ryan began to open up more. During the therapy sessions, he no longer kept his emotions hidden. He shared about Ace, the painful memories, but also the deep appreciation. And there, always beside him, was Lulu, quietly sitting by his side, her eyes always watching him with deep concern. One day, during a special therapy session, Ryan sat across from Dr. Linda, but instead of sitting alone, Lulu sat beside him, quietly and patiently, as though knowing this was an important moment. Ryan looked at Lulu, then over to Dr. Linda, and began to share about Ace. "Ace and I went through so many battles together," Ryan said, his voice soft but filled with emotion. "Every time I was in danger, he was there with me, always ready to protect. But when he sacrificed himself, I didn't know what to do. Ace wasn't just a dog, he was the only friend I had in the war. And when he was gone, I didn't know how to keep going." Throughout the session, Lulu remained by Ryan's side, unmoving, just listening to every word he spoke. Ryan felt the peace that Lulu brought. Even without saying anything, Lulu seemed to be there to support him, without needing any encouragement. For Ryan, Lulu's presence was an essential part of this healing journey. He no longer felt alone during the conversations, no longer felt like his pain was a burden. Ryan looked at Lulu, and for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel as if the weight of his grief was too much to bear. With Lulu beside him, he knew he had the strength to face the memories, the love, and the pain that had once held him back. After the therapy session, Dr. Linda spoke softly. "Ryan, I can see that you did very well today. Sharing about Ace isn't easy, but it's an important step. And having Lulu by your side has helped a lot. I believe having a companion like Lulu is essential in this process." Ryan looked at Lulu with eyes full of gratitude. "Thank you," Ryan whispered, as if speaking directly to Lulu, his voice filled with a deep appreciation. "You've been by my side through all these years. You're not just a work companion, but a loyal friend, always helping me through the tough moments." Lulu's eyes shone with understanding. Ryan felt the empathy in her gaze. He didn't need to say anything more, because everything was clear in his heart. He realized that Lulu was not just a service dog, but a true friend, one who had helped him find trust in himself again. But today, despite Lulu's presence, Ryan still felt heavy inside. He walked into the therapy room where the group members were already seated, but his mind was still spinning with memories of Ace. The memories of his fallen companion, the battles he and Ace had faced together, now felt like a burden he couldn't release. Throughout the session, Ryan remained silent. He didn't speak, didn't engage in any of the conversations. Dr. Linda and the other members' questions seemed to pass by him, unable to reach him. Every time Dr. Linda asked about his emotions, Ryan only responded briefly, not wanting to talk about Ace. He didn't want to confront those painful memories again. Lulu, sensing the shift in Ryan, never left his side. She sat next to him, her eyes focused on him, as if understanding that he needed a little comfort. Suddenly, Lulu stood up, moving toward Ryan silently. She placed her head gently on his shoulder, offering what felt like a quiet embrace. The warmth of Lulu's body made Ryan feel an unexpected calm wash over him. Ryan didn't say a word, but he felt the special connection between them. Lulu didn't need to do anything else but be there, sharing in his sorrow that he couldn't put into words. Lulu's presence allowed him to relax, to feel, for the first time in many days, that he could breathe again. He smiled softly, a smile full of appreciation. "Thank you, Lulu," Ryan whispered, gently stroking her smooth coat. "You understand me more than I thought." Lulu remained still, her head resting lightly on Ryan's shoulder, as if she understood that what he needed wasn't comforting words or advice, but simply her presence, the companionship she had always given him. The memories of Ace were still in Ryan's mind, but Lulu helped him realize that he didn't have to carry that pain alone anymore. Lulu was helping him face the past without fear or guilt. The silence between them stretched on. No one speaking, just Ryan and Lulu sharing a quiet moment where he no longer felt alone in his sorrow. Ryan felt the friendship, the unconditional love that Lulu had for him. In that moment, Ryan knew that the healing journey wouldn't be easy, but he wouldn't have to walk it alone. "Thank you, Lulu," Ryan said, his voice soft but filled with gratitude. "You're such an important part of this journey, and I know with you by my side, I won't have to face these memories alone anymore." Lulu gently wagged her tail, but didn't move from Ryan's shoulder. Ryan felt like part of his pain had been shared, like a weight had been lifted from him. It was an unfamiliar but deeply comforting sensation. He no longer had to carry the pain alone. Lulu's presence wasn't just about companionship in work. It was a silent sharing, an unspoken comfort only true friendship could offer. Lulu wasn't just a canine trained for work. She wasn't just a tool for tasks, but a part of Ryan's life, a loyal friend who understood him even when he couldn't express himself in words. Every gesture from Lulu wasn't just a trained reaction. It was a display of friendship and unwavering loyalty. One late afternoon, after the therapy session, Ryan and Lulu took a walk through the park near the VA hospital. The surroundings were peaceful, with only the sound of their footsteps and the rustling of leaves in the wind. Lulu walked beside Ryan, maintaining a respectful distance, her bright eyes scanning the surroundings. But when Ryan stopped, Lulu stopped too, looking at him. No command was given, yet Lulu understood that he needed a quiet moment. Ryan felt a special connection between them, an understanding that didn't need words. "Thank you," Ryan whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You don't know, but your presence has helped me get through so much. You're not just my dog, you're a true companion." Lulu turned her head to look at Ryan, her brown eyes never leaving his, filled with understanding. Ryan felt the love and unconditional loyalty that Lulu had for him. It wasn't just following commands. It was the deep empathy she had for him, a friendship that words couldn't capture. Every time Lulu looked at him, every movement she made carried a message. "I will always be here with you." Lulu's empathy wasn't always displayed through clear actions. It could be as simple as a glance, a gentle wag of her tail when Ryan felt tired or anxious. Sometimes it was just her presence, standing still beside him, as if saying, "I'm here, and I will never leave you." Once, as Ryan sat deep in thought in the therapy room, his eyes fixed on the picture of Ace he always kept by his side, Lulu sat quietly beside him. She didn't paw at him or do anything else, but Ryan could feel the sadness emanating from him. Suddenly, Lulu stood and walked over to Ryan, gently resting her head on his lap. Ryan looked down and softly stroked her head. This wasn't a trained action. It was a special connection, one only true friends could understand. "Thank you, Lulu," Ryan sighed, his voice heavy with emotion. "You know, I feel Ace here with me, somehow, because of you. You're not just a work companion. You're the friend who helped me survive this pain." Lulu gently wagged her tail, looking at Ryan with deep attention, as if to say she understood. Ryan realized that even without Ace, Lulu's presence had taught him that love and loyalty never truly leave, even when the one you love is gone. Canine, companion by his side, but a true friend who had been with him every step of the way. Lulu's presence, her unwavering loyalty, and the quiet comfort she offered had become a vital part of his healing journey. Each therapy session, with Lulu at his side, made the heavy burden of his memories more manageable, the past less daunting, and his steps forward a little steadier. "Lulu isn't just a dog," Ryan continued, his voice steady yet emotional. "She's the only friend I can trust right now. In therapy, when I feel too exhausted, too burdened by the memories. Lulu is the one who makes me feel safe. She doesn't need to say a word. Just sitting next to me. I feel peace." Dr. Linda smiled and nodded, clearly understanding how vital Lulu's presence was to Ryan. "Lulu is an indispensable part of your therapy journey. The sense of safety she brings helps you open up and start facing your pain." Ryan sat in silence for a moment, feeling as though Dr. Linda's words had touched a truth deep within him. In the past, he could never sit still or speak about the emotions he had kept hidden. But now, with Lulu by his side, everything felt easier. That sensation was strange, but also incredibly relieving. He no longer feared facing the past. Lulu wasn't just a dog. She was a friend who had helped him realize that facing the pain was the only way to heal. During another therapy session, after the group had begun sharing their stories, Ryan felt he was ready to share his own buried emotions. But this time, unlike before, he felt an unusual calm. Lulu sat beside him, gently placing her head on his hand, as if reminding him that he wasn't alone. When it was his turn to speak, Ryan looked at Lulu and said, "I feel like Lulu has helped me so much during these therapy sessions. She doesn't need to say anything, but just being here with me is enough. When I feel tired, when memories of Ace flood back, Lulu is always by my side, always offering comfort without words. That feeling has really helped me a lot." It wasn't just an acknowledgement of Lulu, but a clear recognition of her role in Ryan's healing journey. As Ryan looked at Lulu, he felt he didn't just have a dog by his side, but a true friend. Someone who had stood by him through the toughest times. Someone who had helped him navigate the pain that once seemed insurmountable. And with Lulu's presence, Ryan realized that he didn't have to walk this road alone anymore. Ryan realized that he no longer carried the weight of his memories alone. His journey of healing, although still ongoing, had shifted. Lulu, his new companion, had become an irreplaceable part of his life. While Ace had once been his anchor, Lulu had now stepped into that role, offering comfort, understanding, and unwavering loyalty. In the next therapy session, Ryan began to open up more, no longer hesitant to share the deep memories of Ace. He recalled the battles fought together, the tense moments when only their companionship had seen them through. These weren't just images in his mind, but integral parts of his life, memories he had kept buried for so long. One morning in the therapy room, as everyone began to share their stories, Ryan spoke about the first mission he and Ace had been assigned to in the battlefield. He remembered the exact moment when they entered a section under attack, and only Ace could sense the looming danger. "Ace saved me countless times in the battlefield. One time, when our team was ambushed, I was trapped in the rubble. Ace didn't hesitate. He rushed in, protecting me from the bullets. All I could do was hold on to him, and he got me to safety." Ryan's voice trembled as he spoke, but he didn't stop. He knew sharing Ace's story was the only way to face those painful memories. Ryan could never forget the moments he and Ace had faced life and death together. He recalled the time when Ace discovered a buried landmine. The team was moving through a dangerous area when Ace suddenly stopped. Ryan didn't react in time, but Ace crouched low, signaling the imminent danger. Ace was the only one who detected the threat before I could even react. He always knew how to protect me, even when I couldn't sense the danger. The memories of those moments were overwhelming, but it was the final memory that hurt the most. The moment Ace sacrificed himself to protect him. When the bomb exploded, I saw Ace leap in front of me, shielding me from the blast. He didn't hesitate for a second. And when the bomb went off, I knew I'd never see Ace again. Ryan's words began to falter, his voice cracking as tears welled up in his eyes. The pain of losing Ace, the sacrifice he made, weighed heavily on him. But he also realized that these memories weren't a sign of weakness. They made him stronger. They reminded him of what Ace had done for him, and that was a bond that would never be broken. Throughout the session, Lulu stayed by Ryan's side, quiet, but her presence made everything feel lighter. Each time Ryan spoke about Ace, Lulu would nudge him, gently resting her head on his lap, as if to say, "I'm here, I understand, and I'm not going anywhere." Ryan looked down at Lulu, and in that moment he realized that even though Ace was gone, he no longer felt alone. Lulu's companionship wasn't just about helping him in his work, it was a vital part of his healing journey. Lulu wasn't just a service dog, she was a friend who helped him through the pain, just as Ace had done in the past. For the first time in a long while, Ryan felt like he could breathe a little easier. The memories of Ace no longer haunted him. Instead, they became moments of respect and gratitude. He no longer felt trapped by his past. With Lulu by his side, he had a chance to move forward, not without the pain, but with the strength to carry it and honor it. Ryan no longer felt guilt when he thought about Ace's sacrifice. Instead, he felt pride. He reminded himself, "Ace will always be a part of me, and I will live as he lived, strong, loyal, and never giving up." Lulu had become an irreplaceable part of his healing process, not just a work companion, but a priceless source of encouragement that helped him keep moving forward. Each therapy session, Ryan felt Lulu grow even closer to him. She was no longer just a dog, but a deeply understanding companion who had helped him face the memories of Ace without fear or guilt. Sharing about Ace in therapy no longer felt heavy. Instead, Ryan realized that Lulu's presence was what had helped him open up, not only to the group, but also to himself. One day in therapy, Ryan sat facing the group, feeling lighter than before. Lulu sat beside him, her bright eyes watching him with empathy. Ryan no longer felt guilt when talking about Ace. He didn't feel regret or fear when remembering Ace's final moments. He knew that Ace's sacrifice was a profound act that would always remain in his memory. "Thank you, Lulu," Ryan whispered as he looked into her eyes, his gaze full of deep gratitude. "You've helped me understand that I don't have to face this pain alone. You're my companion not just at work, but in life. Thank you for always being by my side." Lulu gently wagged her tail, her eyes never leaving Ryan, as if understanding everything he had just said. Ryan smiled and gently stroked Lulu's smooth coat. Lulu didn't need to say anything, but her actions were enough for Ryan to feel the comfort he had long been searching for. Lulu wasn't just a canine companion, she was a vital part of his healing journey. During each therapy session, Lulu remained Ryan's loyal friend, helping him feel safe and stronger every time he faced the past. When Ryan felt exhausted, when the memories of Ace rushed back, Lulu would sit beside him in silence, but with a profound understanding. Her eyes seemed to say, "You're not alone. I'm here." And that was what Ryan needed the most at that moment: comfort, understanding, without the need for words. "You help me face the memories I've tried to bury," Ryan said, his eyes becoming misty. "Ace wasn't just a companion, he was a part of my life. But I know now that I need to live with those memories, not let them torment me. And thanks to you, I can do that." Every time Ryan spoke about Ace, he no longer felt guilt or regret. He no longer thought he hadn't done enough to save Ace. Instead, he understood that Ace had sacrificed for him out of friendship and loyalty. And now, Lulu was the one continuing that legacy, helping Ryan overcome his pain and find peace within himself. In the quiet moments, Ryan knew that even though Ace was gone, Lulu would always be by his side. It was Lulu's love and loyalty that helped him realize that friendship and loyalty didn't only exist in those who had sacrificed. Lulu wasn't just a canine companion, she was the friend who would help him live on, overcoming life's challenges, just like Ace had done before. Ryan had found the strength to face his past and the painful memories of Ace. He no longer felt alone, and he knew that even without Ace, the friendship and support that Lulu provided were vital for him to keep moving forward. Today, Ryan had decided he was ready to share his story with the therapy group. This was a crucial decision, not only because it meant confronting the memories of Ace, but also because he realized he couldn't keep hiding his pain any longer. In recent days, he had learned how to open up, thanks to Lulu's presence and the therapy sessions he'd attended. He had learned to accept the past, and now it was time to share his pain in order to heal. As he walked into the therapy room, Ryan felt a clear shift inside him. In the past, he had felt hesitant and afraid whenever asked about Ace. But today, he didn't feel that tension. Lulu walked beside him, accompanying him on this journey. Ryan felt comforted by her presence, knowing that nothing could make him feel judged or alone. As the others in the group began sharing their stories, Ryan realized that he was ready. Dr. Linda, the group leader, spoke the first words. "Today, if you'd like, we can begin sharing our stories." Ryan didn't rush, but he felt more grounded than ever. After a few moments of silence, he looked at Lulu, then turned to the group. "You all probably know I'm not someone who opens up easily," Ryan began, his voice soft yet determined. "But today, I want to share about my special friend, Ace." Ryan couldn't help but choke up when he said Ace's name. He started talking about the early days when he first met Ace, the first time Ace entered his life. "The first time I met Ace, he was just a little puppy. But from that moment, I knew he would be an incredible companion. We've been through so much together, in war and in the peaceful days. Ace wasn't just a K9, he was a warrior. He saved my life more times than I can count." Ryan paused, his eyes clouded with painful memories, but he pushed forward. "There was this one time we were ambushed. I got trapped in the rubble. Ace didn't hesitate. He rushed in to save me, thinking only of me, not his own safety. He was the only one who got me out of there alive." Lulu sat quietly beside Ryan, her eyes full of understanding and encouragement. Every time Ryan spoke of those moments, Lulu gently wagged her tail, as if to say, "I understand, and I'm here with you." As Ryan shared more memories of Ace, recalling the times Ace had saved him from danger, he felt the support from the therapy group. The members listened intently, offering no judgment, no interruptions. There was only the silence of shared empathy, a kind of connection that Ryan hadn't realized he needed until now. He began to feel lighter, his heart opening up. And when Ace sacrificed himself... Ryan paused, unable to hold back the tears. He took a deep breath before continuing. "At that moment, I couldn't save him. He jumped between me and the bomb, and when he died, I didn't know what to do. But now I understand he did everything he could. He sacrificed himself for me, and I will always remember him." Ryan's voice caught, but this time he didn't feel guilt or regret. He felt like he had shared a large part of his heart, and now he didn't feel as heavy as before. The support from Lulu and the therapy group made Ryan realize that he didn't have to carry these memories alone anymore. Dr. Linda looked at Ryan and nodded gently. "Thank you, Ryan, for sharing your story. That's the first step in your healing journey, and I believe that sharing it will help you move forward." Ryan sat in silence for a moment, feeling a release in his heart that he'd never felt before. Ace, the memories of fighting side by side, no longer felt like something too heavy to bear. Sharing Ace's story with the group didn't just help him release some of the weight, it made him feel understood, like never before. As Ryan looked around the group, he realized that he wasn't alone anymore. The people around him, despite having their own stories, had all experienced loss and pain. They each carried a part of their story that no longer needed to be hidden. And as Ryan shared Ace's story, he felt a real connection to those around him. "Thank you, Lulu," Ryan whispered, looking at his K9 companion. Lulu sat quietly, her eyes never leaving Ryan, as if she understood that now he was ready to accept support from others beyond just her. The members of the group continued to listen attentively. Dr. Linda smiled at him, her eyes full of encouragement. "Ryan, your story is powerful. I can feel the pain, but also the pride in what you've shared. You're not just healing yourself, you're healing those around you, too." Ryan looked at Dr. Linda and the group members. Each of them had their own story, but no one looked at him with pity. The stories they shared were not just about empathy, but about a reminder that even though pain can be overwhelming, sharing it helps us no longer feel alone. Ryan realized that whether it was him, Lulu, or the others in the therapy group, we were all part of a collective healing journey. One member of the group, Michael, a veteran with deep scars that hadn't yet healed, spoke after Ryan finished. "I understand that feeling, Ryan," Michael said, his voice gentle but strong. "Loss is a part of us, but we don't have to carry it alone. Each time we share, each time we speak out, we allow ourselves to heal." Michael's words were like a light breaking through the darkness, and Ryan felt a deep connection with the group. He no longer felt alone in his pain. Each person had their own struggles, but now they could see each other's pain not as a burden, but as part of the healing process. Ryan continued, his voice softer, no longer as tense as before. "Maybe I've been hiding this for too long. I thought not talking about it would make me stronger. But now I understand. Sharing and letting others understand me is the only way to heal." Lulu sat beside him, listening quietly as Ryan spoke. He looked down at her, and in that moment he realized that Lulu had helped him find peace again. It wasn't the words from anyone else, but Lulu's silent presence and loyalty that had helped him face everything. Lulu didn't need to say anything. She just sat there, understanding him in a way no one else could. And in that quiet moment, Ryan knew that with Lulu by his side, he wasn't alone anymore. He could face the memories, face the pain, and keep going. This wasn't just about the past. It was about learning to live with it, to accept it, and to let it be a part of his journey instead of letting it define him. Ryan's heart swelled with gratitude as he sat quietly, feeling the weight of everything he had just shared. Lulu, his constant companion, sat beside him, offering silent support in a way words never could. She didn't need to speak. The steady presence of her eyes said it all. With every look, Ryan felt a deep understanding and unconditional love from her that he didn't even need to ask for. "Thank you, everyone," Ryan said, his voice thick with emotion. "I've never felt less alone than I do today. Thank you, Lulu, for being here with me, and thank you to the group for letting me share my story." Dr. Linda smiled and nodded. "We're so glad you chose to share your story, Ryan. Every step you take is not just a step forward for you, but for all of us. You're healing yourself, and you're helping those of us in this group heal too." Ryan felt a huge release, something that had been stuck in him for so long. The days of hiding his pain no longer drained him. The memories of Ace were no longer a burden. They were a part of him, and Lulu had helped him see that sharing was an essential part of healing. He wasn't alone anymore in this journey. He felt proud. Ace had sacrificed for him, and that was an integral part of the priceless bond they shared. The story of Ace wasn't a painful memory, it was a vital part of Ryan's life. He began to realize that facing the past wasn't about burying the pain, but about transforming it into motivation to move forward. Ryan no longer felt guilty or regretful when thinking about Ace. Instead, he felt deep gratitude. Ace was a friend, a warrior, and an important part of everything Ryan had become. He realized that healing meant learning to share, learning to let those memories make him stronger, not weaker. One afternoon in the therapy room, as everyone in the group shared their stories, Ryan didn't feel the old hesitation or fear. He glanced at Lulu, who sat beside him, her warm eyes gazing at him as if saying, "I'm here. Share it all. There's nothing to hide." Ryan took a deep breath, And this time all he felt was calm. He spoke more honestly, his voice steady. I used to think that if I kept this pain hidden, I would become stronger. But now I understand, sharing doesn't make me weak. We have to face the past to truly live with ourselves. Ace isn't a loss. Ace is a part of me. He will always live on inside me. Dr. Linda smiled, her eyes full of empathy and encouragement. That's right, Ryan. When you face the past, you not only free yourself from its weight, but also learn to love those memories instead of avoiding them. Ryan's gaze softened as he looked at Lulu. And thanks to Lulu, I've come to understand this, he continued, his voice full of gratitude. She's always been here with me. When I felt tired, when I didn't want to face the truth, Lulu was the friend who didn't say a word, but quietly stayed by my side, helping me get through each day. Lulu didn't move, just gently wagged her tail, her eyes still focused on Ryan, as if to say, I understand, and I will never leave you. The presence of Lulu had cleared everything up for Ryan. Ryan's words echoed through the room, his voice steady but full of emotion. As he spoke about Ace, something inside him shifted. His heart, once heavy with guilt and regret, now felt lighter. The weight of years spent hiding his pain was slowly lifting, replaced by a quiet strength. The group listened in silence, their presence a constant reminder that he wasn't alone anymore. Ace wasn't just a dog, Ryan continued, his voice gaining confidence. He was my partner, a warrior, and he saved me more times than I can count. I used to think I couldn't go on without him, but now I know. I'll carry his memory with me forever. The room was filled with a collective understanding. Each person in the group knew the weight of loss. Some had lost comrades, others, parts of themselves. But today, Ryan wasn't just sharing his grief. He was sharing his healing. Lulu sat quietly at his side, her gaze soft but steady, as if silently reminding him that she was there, as constant as Ace had been. Her presence was a balm, soothing the raw edges of Ryan's emotions. And as he spoke, Ryan realized that Lulu wasn't just a dog to him, she was his companion, his partner in this new chapter of life. Dr. Linda smiled warmly at Ryan, her voice gentle but filled with admiration. Thank you, Ryan. What you've done today is a huge step. Sharing your story is not just about healing for you, it's healing for all of us. We all carry pieces of our past, but it's in sharing them that we make peace with them. Ryan nodded, his eyes shifting between the group and Lulu. He no longer felt the fear he once did when he thought about Ace. There was no longer a need to bury his memories or his pain. Instead, he was learning to accept them as part of who he was, and in doing so, he was starting to feel whole again. Ace may not be here anymore, Ryan continued, his voice stronger now, but I'll never forget what he taught me. The courage, the loyalty, he gave me a second chance at life. And now it's my turn to live fully, without shame, without guilt. Lulu gave a small, comforting whine, as if affirming Ryan's words. He reached down to scratch behind her ears, the simple gesture reminding him that, while Ace had been his past, Lulu was his present and future. Together they would navigate this journey of healing, side by side. Dr. Linda spoke again, her tone thoughtful. What you're doing, Ryan, is important. You've not only shared your pain, but you've also shown others that it's okay to open up. That's a rare and powerful gift. Ryan's smile was soft but genuine. I couldn't have done it without Lulu, he said, glancing at her with love in his eyes. She's helped me more than I can put into words. In that moment, Ryan realized that sharing his story wasn't just about releasing pain. It was about embracing the love, loyalty, and bravery that Ace had left behind. And, with Lulu by his side, he was ready to continue moving forward, carrying the lessons and memories of his past, but no longer letting them control his future. Ryan sat quietly, absorbing the weight of Dr. Linda's words. The warmth in her gaze, combined with the unspoken understanding from the group, filled him with a sense of belonging. He had been carrying his memories of Ace alone for so long, but now, those stories no longer felt like burdens. They were integral to him, cherished pieces of his journey. As the therapy session ended, Ryan felt an unusual peace wash over him. It was as though a wall had been lifted, allowing him to breathe a little easier. He knew his healing was far from over, but today he'd taken a significant step. The guilt that once clung to his thoughts about Ace no longer had the same hold. He understood now that healing didn't mean running from those memories. It meant accepting and honoring them. Lulu, ever present by his side, offered a silent comfort. Her eyes, full of empathy, told Ryan everything he needed to know. She understood. Ryan ran his fingers through her soft fur, feeling the warmth that reminded him he wasn't alone anymore. Today was different. It was as though with each word he shared about Ace, a small piece of his pain melted away. He realized that Ace would always be a part of him, an irreplaceable presence. The sacrifice Ace made didn't have to be a source of shame, but a mark of pride, a reminder of the unwavering loyalty and friendship they shared. A small smile tugged at Ryan's lips as a treasured memory of Ace surfaced in his mind. He no longer saw Ace as a painful wound, but as a teacher who had shown him the value of friendship, loyalty, and sacrifice. Ace had taught him so much, not just about their work, but about how to live life with purpose. Now every memory of Ace was a reflection of that love and sacrifice, not a source of guilt. As the therapy sessions continued, Ryan began to open up, letting go of the emotions he'd hidden for so long. The memories of Ace no longer felt like raw wounds, but sacred moments in a lasting friendship. Sitting beside Lulu, Ryan felt a deep connection, not just to her, but to the healing process she silently guided him through. Dr. Linda was right. Sharing his story had lifted a weight Ryan hadn't realized he was carrying. Before, speaking about Ace had left him feeling burdened, but now, each word felt like a release. There were no secrets left, no pain hidden away. He was learning to live with his memories, not letting them weaken him, but using them to grow stronger. Lulu's eyes, filled with understanding, never left him as he spoke. She was more than just his working partner. She was his anchor, the steady presence in his life through every trial. Whether he was happy or sad, facing the painful past or the challenges of the present, Lulu was always there, unconditionally by his side. Ryan looked down at Lulu, his voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Lulu. If it weren't for you, I don't know how I'd have made it through all of this. You've helped me realize I can live with the memories of Ace without feeling guilty." Lulu wagged her tail gently, almost as if responding to Ryan's words with a silent understanding. Ryan knew Lulu truly understood him. She wasn't just a K9 companion. She was a crucial part of his healing journey. He sighed softly, the tension that had once weighed heavily on him lifting away. By confronting his past and no longer fearing the memories of Ace, Ryan had found peace. The memories no longer felt like something that would hurt him. Ace would always be a part of him. And now, with Lulu by his side, Ryan knew he could carry those memories without being overwhelmed by pain. A smile crept across his face as he looked at Lulu one more time. "Thank you, Lulu," he whispered, "for always being here, for helping me live authentically." With a deep sense of peace beginning to spread through him, Ryan stood up, ready to step into the next phase of his therapy journey. He looked around the room, no longer feeling the same nervousness or anxiety that had once gripped him. It had been a long time since he felt this calm. Every step he took now felt lighter, as if the burdens of his past had been lifted. He glanced down at Lulu, who sat beside him, her bright eyes locked on him, She didn't need to say anything. Her presence was enough to fill him with a sense of reassurance. Ryan smiled gently, resting his hand on Lulu's head as an unspoken thank you. "Thank you, Lulu. You've helped me see everything more clearly. I no longer feel guilty when I think about Ace." Looking into Lulu's eyes, Ryan realized he didn't have to face the memories of Ace alone anymore. He had come to understand that his past, though filled with pain and loss, also contained beautiful moments he would never forget. He wasn't afraid to face those memories anymore. The memories of Ace were no longer a burden. They had become an essential part of his life. Ryan began to understand that, in order to heal, he couldn't avoid the memories of Ace. He had to accept that Ace sacrificed himself for him, and that was a part of their story, one he would never be able to forget. The stories of Ace were not just about loss, but about loyalty and unconditional friendship. Ace had lived a courageous life, and though he was no longer with Ryan, that friendship would live on in his heart forever. Ryan recalled moments in the war, those times when he and Ace fought side by side, facing danger together. Each time Ace saved him, each time it rushed into danger to protect him, was an act of unconditional sacrifice that few could truly understand. Ace wasn't just a military dog. He was a true friend who had taught Ryan what absolute loyalty meant. And now, facing the sacrifice Ace made, Ryan no longer felt he had to bear it with guilt. He understood that Ace had done everything he could, and now Ryan's job was to live on, honoring that sacrifice. In the days that followed, Ryan learned to live with Ace's memories, not as a burden, but as a significant part of his life. He no longer felt guilty when thinking about Ace. Instead, those memories reminded him of the bravery and the love that defined their time together. Ace had taught him more than just military skills. He had shown him how to face life with loyalty, courage, and love, no matter the hardship. And now, with Lulu beside him, Ryan knew he could move forward, carrying the memory of Ace with him, but no longer weighed down by it. Ryan stood up, his gaze steady as he looked around at the therapy group. "I used to think I would never get past this pain," he said, his voice calm but clear. "But now I understand that I don't have to forget Ace to heal. I just need to learn to live with those memories and be grateful for the friendship Ace gave me." Dr. Linda smiled gently at him, nodding in approval. "Accepting those memories is a big step forward, Ryan. Ace's sacrifice will always be a part of you, but it doesn't have to be a source of pain. It's what helps you grow and become stronger." Ryan felt a weight lift from his chest. He understood now that Ace wasn't something he had to hide from, but rather a part of what made him who he was today. Honoring Ace, remembering him, wasn't giving up. It was accepting and celebrating the bond they shared, the sacrifice Ace made for him. He no longer felt guilty, no longer felt that tightness of regret. Ryan had learned to live with the memories of Ace, and he would keep living, continuing to fight as Ace had. He knew that even though Ace was gone, their friendship would never fade. And with Lulu by his side, he would keep walking on this journey of healing, stronger and more resolute than ever before. Ryan and Ace's story shows us something crucial about life. Friendship and loyalty have no limits, even between humans and dogs. Ace, through his ultimate sacrifice, taught Ryan that every pain can become a valuable lesson. And thanks to Lulu, Ryan's new canine companion, he learned how to face the past and accept the sacrifice without guilt or regret. We all have our own pains in life, but Ryan has shown us that to heal, we need to open up, share, and seek support from those around us. No one should have to face pain alone. Like Ryan, you can find strength in friendship and loyalty, whether it comes from a canine friend or anyone beside you. Remember that sacrifice, loyalty, and unconditional friendship always exist, and we can overcome any challenge if we embrace them. Thank you for following this story. Please share it if you feel the strength of friendship. Rocky, a brave German shepherd, had always been by David's side, fighting through the hardest times together. But now, David faced a decision, one that could change everything. His painful past had weighed him down for so long, and it was up to him to decide if he could let go and believe in life again. Rocky didn't need words. His quiet loyalty was enough to help David find strength. This story isn't just about loyalty. It's about friendship, sacrifice, and love that never gives up. Can they face the future together and heal from the past? The military gate stood in a remote area, deep between the mountains and dense forests, almost entirely cut off from the outside world. In the early morning, the place was shrouded in a thin, misty fog, like a heavy blanket covering everything, making the world around it look dim and still. The cold, biting air seeped into every crack, carrying with it the silence of the morning before the day truly began. Soldiers patrolled along the rigid concrete fence, weapons by their sides, stepping in sync within the quiet of the base. The only sound breaking the stillness was the wind, whistling through the gaps in the concrete walls. But even the wind couldn't mask the deep feeling of solitude and unfamiliarity that hung in the air. One of the guards, walking past the main gate, suddenly stopped. His eyes locked onto something in the distance, a large figure standing in the narrow road that led into the military zone. It was a dog, but not just any dog. Rocky, a massive German shepherd with a powerful, muscular frame covered in mud, stood like a wall, staring intently at the old, battered truck beside him. Rocky wasn't on a leash, wasn't with a trainer, and wasn't under anyone's control. The guards and security personnel stopped one by one, exchanging hesitant glances, unsure of whether to approach. Rocky's presence was anything but ordinary. He stood as if on guard, his eyes sharp as knives, his body erect and unyielding, with no sign of wavering. Though he showed no signs of aggression, the tension in his posture made it clear that he was fully alert, and every movement felt deliberate. This wasn't the first time the base personnel had encountered a situation like this, but there was something different about Rocky. He wasn't just a guard dog, not some harmless creature that merely growled. Rocky's presence here felt purposeful, like he was guarding something no one could see. The guards stood silently, unsure of what to do next. As security officers approached the truck, they realized Rocky was watching every move they made, his eyes tracking them closely. Whenever someone drew too near, he let out a low growl, a sound that seemed to say, "Stay back!" There was no sign of aggression, but the way he controlled the space, his utter vigilance, made everyone feel uneasy. The officers began to pull back, wondering if this was just a regular guard dog, or if Rocky was guarding something far more significant than anyone could understand. Then, from the shadows of the base, Commander Blake emerged. A seasoned leader, familiar with countless tense situations, Blake couldn't shake the feeling that something was different this time. A sense of unease stirred within him as he walked out into the foggy path, Rocky's sharp gaze following his every step. Everything in the air felt heavy, as if waiting for something monumental to happen. And then, almost instinctively, Blake felt something strange in the air. Was Rocky guarding a secret that he couldn't yet understand? As he stepped closer, the tension in the air only grew. Rocky remained perfectly still, his eyes locked onto Blake, unwavering and sharp. There was no warmth in those eyes, just raw alertness and readiness to respond to any threat. Blake had never felt this level of seriousness from a dog before. Rocky wasn't just a regular guard dog. There was something deeper here, a responsibility, a connection to the military base that Blake couldn't quite grasp. The closer Blake got, the more the feeling inside him swelled. This wasn't just a dog keeping intruders at bay. Rocky was guarding something important, something that no one around him could see. The seriousness in his actions couldn't be ignored. Blake knew that every step he took was being closely monitored. He gestured for the security team to stay back, trying to ease the tension, but his instincts told him that the only way to handle this was carefully, cautiously. He was used to tough situations, but this was different. Rocky wasn't attacking, but the dog's unwavering presence made it clear something was at stake, and Blake didn't know if he himself was the threat. With each step closer, Blake felt the tension rise in the air. Rocky's eyes never left him. They were sharp and determined. There was no giving in. Blake could feel it in his bones. The dog was protecting something crucial. He adjusted his pace, neither rushing nor stopping, but fully aware that one wrong move could escalate the situation. Rocky's eyes stayed fixed on him, and with each step Blake took, the dog's head turned slightly, letting out a low growl. It wasn't a threatening growl, but a warning, a subtle reminder. "Don't come any closer." Blake paused, closing his eyes for a moment to gather his thoughts. He knew he couldn't handle this like any other security situation. If Rocky was guarding a secret or someone, Blake needed to approach with patience and caution. He looked into the dog's eyes, and for the first time he noticed a shift. It wasn't just vigilance, it was protection, a deep, unwavering sense of duty. Blake realized he couldn't approach this like any other situation. If he was going to solve this, he needed a new approach, something that respected what Rocky was guarding, something more than just the usual military protocol. The feeling of unease lingered, but Blake knew he couldn't turn back. He took a deep breath and slowly moved toward Rocky, trying to project calm, not wanting to make the dog feel threatened. Once again, Rocky's gaze met his, sharp, unwavering. There was no friendliness in those eyes, but there was no sign of aggression either. Blake could feel the tension growing thicker with each step, and deep down, he knew he couldn't continue without understanding the true reason behind Rocky's actions. He stopped, the anxiety shifting into determination. Maybe what he needed to do wasn't act immediately, but figure out why Rocky was behaving this way. Blake inhaled deeply, trying to shake the heavy feeling that had settled over him. Though his mind urged him to make a move, his instincts told him that rushing into anything could lead to consequences he couldn't predict. Blake began to think through everything: the resolute gaze of Rocky, the stillness, the refusal to back down. This wasn't the behavior of an ordinary guard dog. Rocky had no leash, no trainer, no external control. This dog was standing watch on its own, guarding something. Blake couldn't shake the question. Was Rocky guarding a secret? And if so, could that secret have something to do with David Holt, the missing comrade from a mission that Blake had always assumed ended in death? The suspicion grew stronger in Blake's chest. He couldn't explain it, but he felt a connection between Rocky and David, a link he couldn't quite see clearly. He thought back to past conversations with David. David had always been a reliable comrade and a brave soldier, but now all that remained was a mysterious disappearance with no clear answers. The lingering sense of betrayal from incomplete military reports gnawed at him, pushing him to consider the possibility that David was still alive. Blake wondered if David might truly be alive, hidden away somewhere, or if perhaps Rocky was the key to uncovering the truth. How could a dog appear so suddenly at this moment? And if Rocky was guarding something important, could it be related to what happened to David Holt? The unease became more palpable as Blake began to recall the details of past conversations in the military. He remembered the vague phone calls and the urgent messages that always seemed unclear. Information about David might have been deliberately hidden. And now, Rocky, the only dog left from the mission, had appeared in a strange way, guarding this old truck, as if on a mission that couldn't be revealed. Blake felt everything was starting to fall apart. He couldn't ignore Rocky's presence. This wasn't a coincidence. The feeling inside him was too strong to brush aside. This dog wasn't just guarding the truck. Rocky was guarding a secret, perhaps the truth about David that Blake had never known. He knew that everything was about to change from this moment forward. He couldn't turn back, couldn't ignore Rocky's presence, and couldn't let this untold story remain out of his reach. And in that moment, Blake realized something clear. He had to find the truth, no matter what it took. Blake understood now that not everything could be solved right away. Once he entered this journey, there would be no turning back. He had to understand why. Rocky was back, and Blake knew he had to understand why the dog was blocking the way. Was it truly connected to David Holt? The sense of resolve began to replace the unease that had weighed on Blake. He knew there would be challenges ahead, painful truths he might not be ready to face. But there was no turning back now. Once he walked through this door, there was no way out. Rocky still stood watch, his sharp eyes never leaving Blake. The air around him seemed to pulse with the weight of something monumental, and Blake realized that Rocky was the key, the guide to a secret too big to ignore. Blake turned and motioned to John Collins, the young sailor who had recently joined his team, to step forward. Collins was one of the younger soldiers, his face still holding the innocence of youth, but his eyes carried the weight of memories that were hard to forget. He had served alongside David Holt in the Kashmir campaign, and he was the first to recognize the familiarity in Rocky's gaze. Blake noticed the flicker of worry in Collins' eyes, as if he was battling painful memories. Blake. Collins, I need to know more about David Holt and what he did during the Kashmir operation. Can you help me? Collins paused for a moment, his eyes lingering on Rocky before he turned back to Blake, nodding silently. Collins. David Holt was a brave soldier. He worked with me throughout our time in Kashmir, but it wasn't just him. Rocky, this dog, was his partner. They faced many difficult missions together. Their bond wasn't just training, it was survival. They were there for each other during the most dangerous times. Blake listened intently, sensing the quiet sorrow in Collins' voice. He didn't interrupt, just watched, hoping to understand David Holt through Collins' words. Collins. The two of them, David and Rocky, fought side by side in the Kashmir operation. Everyone knew David was one of the elite SEALs, but when things went south in that mission, Rocky was the only one who stayed with him. No one knew what happened to them. They got caught in the crossfire, and everyone assumed they were gone. Blake felt a chill run down his spine. The words hit him hard. He couldn't believe it, David, his comrade, the man he had thought was lost, might still be alive. But then a new thought flashed in his mind. Could David and Rocky be connected to this old truck? Was the dog guarding David? Or perhaps revealing a hidden truth? Blake. So, you really think David Holt could still be alive? And Rocky, this dog, could be the key to uncovering the truth? Collins fell silent, his gaze distant, as if the painful memories of Kashmir were flooding back. The weight of those lost days lingered in his eyes, and Blake could see the depth of his inner struggle. Collins. I can't be sure, but Rocky's eyes, they're not just guarding the truck. He's guarding a secret, something I can't explain. In those grueling months, David and Rocky formed a bond that can't be broken. And now, seeing this dog, I feel like something's unfinished. Maybe David is still alive. And if he is, I fear there are things we can't predict. Blake felt a tightness in his chest. Collins' words struck him deep, and he couldn't stop thinking about them. If David was really alive, why had no one found him? Why was everything being hidden? And could Rocky be the only remaining proof that everything everyone believed to be true was completely wrong? He suddenly realized this investigation wasn't just about uncovering the truth about David Holt. It was a much bigger story, a secret that could change everything Blake knew about the military and the missions he had served on. Blake looked toward Rocky, the dog's eyes never leaving him, as if waiting for something. He knew he couldn't stop now. He had to dig deeper, find the truth, even if it meant facing danger. Blake, we're not stopping here. I need to know where David is. Rocky is the only lead, and I won't leave this dog alone. Collins nodded, his eyes filled with a seriousness that made Blake feel the weight of responsibility more than ever. He knew this investigation wasn't just about finding David Holt. It was a journey into the dark corners the military didn't want anyone to know about. Blake turned back to Rocky, the dog's gaze still unyielding. A strange sensation stirred inside him, as though there was an unspoken connection between him and this dog. He realized that if he didn't uncover what was hidden behind Rocky and David's disappearance, he wouldn't be able to continue his work with a clear conscience. With Collins's stories fresh in his mind, Blake's doubts about David Holt grew stronger. The events of the past might have been covered up, and David's death could have been part of a larger story someone wanted to keep hidden. Collins's details were making Blake question everything he had known. The military reports, the information from superiors, and the directives he had followed for so long now seemed like lies. Blake couldn't ignore the clues Collins had given him. The memories of David, the comrade he had once thought was lost, were slowly being revealed, and they were beginning to connect. Could it be that the Kashmir operation reports were exaggerated? Or worse, fabricated to cover up truths the military didn't want exposed? Determined not to let this uncertainty control him any longer, Blake decided to keep pushing forward. He asked Collins to provide every piece of information about the Kashmir operation, no matter how small. He felt like he was standing before a massive wall, and the only way to break through it was by continuously digging into the truths that had been kept hidden. Blake. We need to dig deeper, Collins. Everything could be manipulated. We need to find the original reports about David and that operation. Why has there been so much silence? Collins didn't respond immediately, just nodded quietly. He knew this investigation was far from simple. Each step Blake took, each decision, could lead them into dangers they couldn't even imagine. But the truth about David was the only thing that mattered now. The tension inside Blake began to grow. He realized this investigation could uncover something much bigger, a conspiracy within the military, one that no one could have expected. The deeper they went, the more pieces of the puzzle remained missing. The false reports might just be the tip of the iceberg. David Holt's fake death could be part of a much darker plan, one to cover up the military's darkest secrets. Blake felt the urgency to uncover these secrets intensifying. He couldn't allow betrayal and concealment to go on any longer. Each step he took now wasn't just about rescuing David. It was about uncovering everything that had been hidden beneath the dust of silence and lies. The anxiety and confusion slowly began to shift into a new strength. Blake realized that not only David, but he and all of his comrades had been deceived all along. He stood up, turned back to Collins and Rocky, and ordered them to continue the investigation without hesitation. Blake, we will find the truth, no matter how long it takes. Collins looked at him, his eyes no longer filled with doubt. He understood now that with each step, they weren't just facing danger, they were facing a change that would alter their lives forever. Blake felt the unease growing within him. The image of Rocky standing guard over the old truck, eyes fixed on him, still haunted his thoughts. This dog wasn't just a guard dog. It was like an invisible shield, protecting something important, a secret that couldn't be revealed. The more Blake dug, the more he felt himself being pulled into a story he wasn't ready to confront. Rocky could be the only sign that would help him understand what truly happened to David Holt. This unease wasn't just ordinary fear. Blake wasn't a coward. He had been through countless brutal situations in the military, faced danger and loss. But this time, something felt different. There was a connection he couldn't see clearly, but he felt it deep in his gut. David Holt, the comrade he'd lost touch with long ago, might still be alive, and his death could be part of a larger conspiracy, a conspiracy the military had tried to cover up. Blake couldn't stop thinking about the friendship he had shared with David. They had fought together, shared moments of hardship. David had always been a brave soldier, someone Blake trusted. But now, Blake had to face the possibility that trust had been betrayed. The reports about David had been manipulated, and perhaps even soldiers like him had been caught in a web of deception they were unaware of. Blake realized that to help David, he wouldn't just need to find the truth, he would have to face challenges more brutal than he could ever imagine. Blake knew the real challenge wasn't just facing external enemies, but confronting those he had once trusted in the military. The tension and fear weighed on him as he thought about all the secrets this investigation could reveal. It wasn't just the danger ahead that scared him, but the truth he might uncover. Betrayal wasn't something easy to accept. How could he face the people he once called teammates? How could he confront those who had built his trust only to shatter it now? These questions haunted him, lingering in his mind with no easy answers. Blake couldn't stop thinking about David. Could he still be alive? If David was, it meant a bigger secret was hiding, and Blake had no choice but to face that dark truth. He felt like he was walking down a path with no return, where each step would uncover things he might not be ready to hear or accept. But he also understood that fear couldn't control his actions. David and Rocky were the only ones he could trust right now. As Blake stood there, looking at Rocky, he realized there was no turning back. He had to continue, to get to the bottom of the truth, even if it meant facing difficulties and betrayals that would be hard to bear. He knew that what he was doing wasn't just for David, but for the very trust and loyalty he had built throughout his years in the military. Without it, David and everyone else would be left in the shadows of silence. Blake turned to Rocky again, the dog still standing there, eyes sharp, never leaving him. His footsteps echoed on the ground as he made his way toward the old truck. Rocky didn't budge, still holding his position. As Blake neared, he could feel the tension thickening in the air. All eyes from the soldiers and security personnel were on Rocky, as if any wrong move could provoke the dog. But Blake had no time to worry about that. He knew everything could change if he found a clue in this truck. Blake stepped closer, stopping when he was only a few steps away from Rocky. He looked into the dog's eyes, trying to convey calm and resolve. There was no resistance from Rocky, but the tension in the air remained. A low growl escaped Rocky, but this time, there was no threat. The dog was simply waiting, as if expecting Blake to make a decision. Blake took a deep breath and moved forward. He knew he had to approach the truck, to understand why Rocky was guarding it. Slowly, he reached out to open the truck's door, feeling the cold metal beneath his fingers. The creaking sound of the door echoed through the stillness of the space. Blake carefully raised the door and peered inside. The interior of the truck was nothing special, just an empty, dusty space. But as his eyes landed on the passenger seat, something caught his attention. A strange object lying there. It was an old military collar made of leather, worn with age but still clearly valuable. As he stepped closer, Blake's focus sharpened on the name tag attached to the collar. He carefully picked it up and looked at it. The engraving made him swallow hard, his heart racing with tension. The name on the tag was one Blake never thought he'd see again. David Holt. Blake froze. Everything around him blurred, as if he were seeing a truth he was never prepared to accept. He couldn't believe his eyes. David Holt, the man he had thought sacrificed his life in the Kashmir operation, could somehow be connected to this truck. And more than that, David's collar and name tag were found in the truck that Rocky was guarding. This was no coincidence. The tension inside Blake reached its peak. He stood there, holding the name tag, his heart surging with a wave of doubt and disbelief. Everything Blake had once believed about the Kashmir operation, about David's death, now seemed to be crumbling. He started questioning everything he had known, the false reports, the cover-ups within the military. David couldn't have died like everyone thought. Blake understood now that David Holt's death had been concealed for some reason. Perhaps a conspiracy, or perhaps betrayal within the very ranks of the military. Rocky still stood there, unmoving, as if guarding something far more important than this old truck. Blake knew that what he had just discovered was only the beginning of a much bigger story. He had to keep moving forward, even if it meant facing dangers or betrayals he couldn't yet fathom. He had to uncover the truth about David Holt and what happened during the Kashmir operation. Blake took a deep breath, placed David's name tag in his pocket, and turned back to face Rocky. This was no longer just an ordinary investigation. He felt as though he had opened a door leading into a story the military had tried to bury. David Holt, the man he had thought perished in the Kashmir operation, might still be alive, and everything he knew about the incident might only be part of a larger plan he couldn't yet grasp. Blake stood still for a moment, unable to fully process what he had just discovered. The name tag wasn't just a relic or a worthless object. It was clear evidence that David Holt might not be dead after all. Blake's mind tried to convince him that this could be a misunderstanding, a coincidence, but deep down, he knew the truth was too clear to ignore. David couldn't have died, as the reports stated, and Blake was beginning to realize that he had been kept in the dark about a far greater truth. Memories of David Holt resurfaced in Blake's mind, like scenes from an old film. David was a brave soldier, always at the front of every mission. He remembered the times they had faced danger together, the brief conversations they shared during their short breaks, and how David always said he wasn't afraid of any challenge. David was a warrior who never backed down, and that made it hard for Blake to believe he would die so easily. Blake recalled the day they lost contact with David during the Kashmir operation. A massive explosion had torn through their unit, splitting them apart. David and Rocky were the last two to retreat from their position, but they never returned. Military reports confirmed no one survived that attack, and David was listed as KIA. But now, looking at David's name tag and military collar, Blake felt a deep sense of doubt. Perhaps the truth about David's death had been hidden for reasons he still couldn't explain. Blake paused, standing still for a moment to gather his thoughts. David could still be alive, and if so, he might be in a perilous situation. David could be locked away somewhere, or even forgotten in some dark corner of war. But one thing Blake couldn't ignore. Rocky was still here. Rocky had been David's loyal companion, and if this dog was still alive, then David might be too, or at least trying to find a way to reach the outside world. Blake felt restless. Colin's words about David and what had happened during the Kashmir operation echoed in his mind. He remembered Collins speaking of the strong bond between David and Rocky, and now he understood that this connection could be the key to solving the case. Blake couldn't just stand still with clues like these right in front of him. He knew that no matter how complicated things got, he had to find out where David was and why the military had hidden the truth. The doubt in Blake's mind grew stronger as he thought about the possibility that David's life might have been stolen by those he once called comrades. Had David been betrayed? Had he become a pawn in a game Blake hadn't known about? These questions gnawed at him, but he knew he couldn't stop now. He had to keep going, had to uncover the truth, even if it meant facing dangers and betrayals he couldn't predict. Blake glanced at the truck again, then back at Rocky. The dog was still standing, its eyes sharp, but there was something in that gaze that made Blake feel like they were at a crossroads, a journey that couldn't be turned back from. Blake couldn't retreat. He had come too far, and what he had discovered couldn't be ignored. He couldn't stop thinking about the military collar and David Holt's name tag. Those weren't just inanimate objects. They were the most important clues in this investigation. Blake felt disoriented and overwhelmed by what he had just uncovered. Throughout his years as a soldier, he was used to solving problems, but he had never faced a secret this large. Everything he thought he knew about David and the Kashmir operation was now falling apart. He wondered if everything he had trusted was actually the truth. Why had the military covered up David Holt's survival? Had his comrades abandoned him, or worse, betrayed him during an operation they thought had ended? The doubt grew stronger as Blake thought about all the false reports and the rumors he had heard about David's death. He couldn't deny that the military's story didn't match what he was discovering. The claims about David's death now felt ambiguous, as if part of a much larger conspiracy he couldn't fully grasp. He realized the truth about David's death might have been twisted to protect those behind it, people he could no longer trust. Blake began to doubt everything around him. He wasn't just questioning the information given by the military, but also the comrades he once trusted. Were they truly his allies in war, or just pawns in a larger game he hadn't seen? Had the truth been hidden from him all this time? The sense of unease swelled inside him, clouding his thoughts, making it hard to think clearly. He didn't know if David had been betrayed in his own operation, or if everything was just a power play that he had never been meant to see. Blake understood that salvation wouldn't come from the military alone, but from those closest to David. Rocky was the clear proof of the loyalty and protection David and this dog had for each other. Blake felt he had to uncover the truth, but not just to save David. He needed to understand why those he had once trusted let David fall into this situation. And more than that, he had to face decisions that he might not be ready to accept. As he looked at Rocky, Blake felt a special connection with the dog. Though Rocky couldn't speak, his eyes seemed to carry a message. Blake knew that Rocky would be the one to guide him on this journey. The bond between David and Rocky was the key to unlocking the door to the truth. This dog wasn't just an ordinary animal. He was David's only companion, and perhaps the only one who knew what had really happened. Blake couldn't stop now. He felt he had gone too far to turn back. He had uncovered a secret, and now everything depended on how he would decipher it. Unanswered questions lingered in his mind, but Blake knew that the truth, no matter how painful, had to be revealed. Blake decided he couldn't let things spiral out of control. He began searching for more information about David Holt, not just from military reports, but from his old comrades. There were pieces of David's life he'd never known, memories and details his old friends could reveal. He wanted to understand what really happened during the Kashmir operation, about David's faked death, and whether that sacrifice was a lie to cover up something far worse. The next day, Blake reached out to Mason, an old soldier who had fought alongside David in Kashmir. Mason was experienced but had grown cynical about the system. Blake called him, asking for a meeting to discuss David. Blake: Mason, I need to know what really happened in Kashmir. Maybe you know more about David. After a long silence, Mason agreed to meet Blake at a small cafe, a place where they could talk without being watched. Blake arrived, his mind heavy with questions that had no answers. Mason showed up, looking tired and worn, but his eyes still had a sharpness to them. He didn't ask many questions, but began to recount the days of fighting in Kashmir. Mason. David was a great soldier, Blake. He never backed down, not even when facing death. But that day, when we were attacked, no one expected David and Rocky not to come back. We thought they had sacrificed themselves. Blake listened, every word sinking into him, but inside, there was an indescribable feeling. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. David was strong, a resilient soldier, but now he might be part of a cover-up, a story left untold. Mason. There's something I've never told anyone. After David and Rocky went missing, I saw something strange in the reports. Some information had been cut out, reports that I couldn't find any reasonable explanation for why they were deleted. I don't know why, but I started to think David might not have died in that operation. He could have been captured, or even held somewhere. Blake was stunned. Mason's words only deepened the suspicion growing inside him. David Holt might have been kidnapped, not sacrificed as the military had claimed. This changed everything. If David was still alive, then he must have been facing a very dangerous situation. Someone had tried to conceal his survival, for reasons Blake couldn't yet understand. Blake. Mason, can you provide me with any documents from that operation? There might be something important we don't know yet. Mason thought for a moment, then nodded. He pulled out a small box from his backpack, filled with old military documents. Mason. These might help you. But I warn you, Blake, if you dig into this, you might face more danger than you think. Blake took the documents, feeling like he was stepping into an investigation that had no way back. The pieces about David and the Kashmir operation were now starting to fit together, forming a much larger puzzle that he had to solve. The deeper Blake dug, the more he realized he wasn't just confronting the truth about David Holt, but a far-reaching conspiracy within the military, one that had affected thousands. Blake stood up, the weight of his responsibility heavy on his shoulders. The next steps would be the hardest, but he couldn't turn back now. As Blake skimmed through the documents, something horrifying dawned on him. The involvement of people within the military in covering up David Holt's survival. Edited military reports, critical details erased, and countless signs pointed to a network working to hide the truth. This was no accident. He realized that a group within the military might have intentionally fabricated David's death to protect their own interests. One specific report Blake discovered sent a chill down his spine. It stated that David had died in an unclear attack, yet there was no evidence or signs to support that claim. Blake remembered his conversation with Collins, where he had mentioned information being cut out of the reports. What Collins shared wasn't baseless. In fact, these findings proved that a conspiracy was gradually coming to light. Blake realized that the betrayal wasn't just a reporting error, but a deliberate strategy. Someone had tried to hide David's survival, and this wasn't the work of ordinary people. He knew this had to involve high-ranking individuals in the military, people with the power to manipulate and conceal the truth. Blake couldn't believe what he had just uncovered. David Holt, the comrade he had once respected, had been betrayed not only by the enemy but also by the very people he had trusted the most. The ones who had once been Blake's teammates, the people he had called brothers, were the ones directly responsible for hiding David's survival. This was too much to accept. Blake understood that this betrayal wasn't just an error in judgment. It was part of a much more intricate web. He realized that if it wasn't these people, no one else could have manipulated the reports and information about David. Blake felt disoriented, unable to fully grasp everything. The deeper he dug, the more questions remained unanswered. Why conceal David's survival? Had he been held captive, forced into silence for some unknown reason? Everything now seemed far more complicated than he had imagined. It wasn't just the betrayal of a few individuals, it could be part of a much larger operation, a conspiracy within the military he had served in. This realization only deepened Blake's sense of being lost in an uncharted maze. The question swirled in his mind, refusing to stop. He thought of his comrades, those who had fought alongside him and David. Were they also involved in this conspiracy? If so, who was truly behind all of this? Blake couldn't stop now. This betrayal was becoming more and more evident. He picked up the documents, carefully reading each page, committing every detail to memory, but with every glance at them, the weight in his chest grew heavier. The truths he was uncovering weren't just about David Holt anymore. They were about the military itself, about the people he had once trusted. Had Blake been wrong to believe in this system? Had all his sacrifices over the years been part of a larger plan to hide darker truths? These discoveries made Blake realize that things were much more complicated than he had ever imagined. The betrayal he was facing wasn't a simple mistake. It was part of an intentional plan carried out by people he had thought would never betray him. He knew that if he was to help David, he had to continue down this path, no matter what unimaginable challenges lay ahead. Blake felt he was standing at a huge crossroads in his life. He wasn't just fighting external enemies anymore. He had to face those who had once been his teammates, the very people he had trusted and respected. David wasn't just another soldier. He was the one Blake had trusted above all else. And now, everything about him, every memory of fighting side by side, seemed to be unraveling into a chaotic mess Blake couldn't piece together. He wanted to understand, to know why David had been left behind and concealed. But the deeper he dug into the truth, the more complicated the story became. Blake couldn't shake the sense of confusion. He wondered if it had been a mistake to trust in this system. Had everything he had given to the military over the years just been part of a plan by those behind the scenes, people he couldn't even recognize? Blake felt lost and bewildered, as though he was losing himself in a game he didn't fully understand. He had faced death countless times and fought for ideals, but he had never had to face betrayal from the very people who were supposed to stand by him until the end. He had come too far to turn back now. Every step they took led them deeper into a world that seemed to close in on them, a world where danger lurked in every shadow, and trust was a scarce commodity. Blake's heart raced as they neared the locked door that could hold the answers they were desperately searching for. They had been moving with precision, each of them aware of the high stakes, the risks they were taking with each step. Blake felt the weight of every decision, every move. This wasn't just about David anymore. This was about uncovering a truth that could change everything, a truth that had been buried deep within the folds of military secrets and betrayals. Blake approached the locked door, his team close behind, moving with the quiet urgency of people who knew there was no turning back. The tension in the air was palpable. It wasn't just the security that felt suffocating. It was the sense that something bigger, something more powerful, was standing in their way, watching them, preventing them from reaching the truth. Blake turned to one of his team members, a look of resolve in his eyes. "We're getting in, no matter what." His team nodded, the grim determination in their eyes matching his own. They couldn't afford to hesitate. They'd come this far, and Blake knew in his gut that David was here, somewhere behind that door. If they didn't act now, they might lose the only chance they had left to uncover the truth. With swift precision, they set to work, bypassing the security systems with practiced ease. The door creaked open, revealing the dark, ominous space beyond. Blake's heart pounded in his chest. This was it. They were about to face whatever secret had been hidden here for so long. The space was eerily quiet, and as Blake stepped inside, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every footstep felt like it echoed through the silence, every breath louder than it should be. The walls seemed to close in around them as they moved deeper, their senses heightened, aware of the danger surrounding them. Blake's mind raced with questions he might not be ready to answer. What had happened to David Holt? What had the military done to him? What had they been hiding, and why? The deeper they went, the more Blake felt the weight of the betrayal of the system he had devoted his life to, and the betrayal of the comrades he had once trusted. But there was no turning back now. They were on the verge of discovering the truth, a truth that could shatter everything he had believed in. They reached a small, dimly lit room at the far end of the facility. Blake's pulse quickened. As the door opened, he saw a figure sitting in the shadows, staring at the ground, unmoving. "David!" Blake's voice cracked as he called out the name. The figure slowly lifted its head. For a moment, Blake couldn't breathe. There, in front of him, was David Holt, alive, but looking like a man who had been through hell. David's eyes met Blake's, and for a moment there was nothing but silence between them. Then, in a voice that barely rose above a whisper, David spoke. "I knew you'd come." Blake knew they were too close to stop now. But nothing was easy. With heightened vigilance, they faced a series of unexpected challenges. The locked door wasn't just a simple barrier, it was a signal that they had crossed into enemy territory, where any misstep could mean death. Blake looked back at his team. He saw the determination in each of their eyes, but also a subtle, lingering worry. They all understood that they were up against something far more dangerous than any military assault they had faced before. This wasn't just a mission to find information. It was a fight against forces more powerful, people who would do anything to keep the truth hidden. The unease grew as they moved further into enemy-controlled territory. The surroundings grew more desolate and ruined, signs of a recent conflict still visible. Abandoned buildings, shattered walls, and an air that seemed to hold its breath created a tension that was almost suffocating. But that wasn't the thing Blake feared the most. What truly made him uneasy was the presence of the enemy, the ones he couldn't see but could always feel. They were out there, waiting in the shadows, looking for the perfect moment to strike. Suddenly, a noise rang out in the distance, like someone approaching their position. Rocky immediately froze, ears perked up, eyes sharp, focused on the space ahead. Blake motioned for the team to stop and stay silent. They all held their breath, moving with even more caution. Rocky began to move again, but this time it was slow, as if it were scanning every inch of their surroundings. Blake watched, noting how the dog was guiding them through the narrow paths, seemingly knowing exactly where to go. But the silence couldn't calm Blake's nerves. The tension kept building. He knew the closer they got, the more attention they would draw. And as he had predicted, within minutes, they were discovered. The sound of footsteps echoed from behind. Before they could react, Blake's team was surrounded. Shadowy figures emerged from the darkness, weapons gleaming in the low light. A confrontation was inevitable. Blake shouted to signal his team to defend. Gunfire shattered the silence, tearing through the air. Bullets whizzed past, cutting through the stillness as Blake's team scrambled to take cover. Blake couldn't stop thinking about David. He knew they only had one chance to find out where David was being held. But now, he had to face a life-or-death battle to keep his team safe. Amid the chaos of flying bullets and explosions, Rocky didn't falter. The dog fought alongside them, protecting every step they took. Rocky wasn't just guarding the team, it was leading them, fearlessly confronting the enemy to ensure Blake's team wasn't surrounded. Blake could feel the dog's unwavering strength in every move. There was no hesitation, no fear. Rocky was the only companion he could trust right now. The situation grew increasingly dire. Blake quickly realized that finding David wasn't going to be easy. He and his team weren't just up against the enemy. They were facing betrayal within their own ranks. The very people they had once thought of as allies had now become their obstacles, blocking the path to uncovering the truth. The battle continued as Blake's team pushed forward toward their objective. Despite the danger lurking around every corner, they couldn't stop. Blake knew that every passing minute could push them into a deadly situation, but he couldn't leave David to face this alone. Blake knew that David could still be alive, and if he kept fighting, if he didn't give up, David would have a chance to be saved. Blake felt that what he was doing wasn't just a responsibility, but a promise to his comrade. He looked toward Rocky, the dog still walking beside them, unshaken. Rocky's persistence, along with the incredible loyalty and bravery he displayed, gave Blake strength. Rocky wasn't just a fighting dog. He was a symbol of resilience, a role model for Blake to follow. Blake knew that it was Rocky's tenacity that served as his greatest motivation on this journey. No matter how many dangers they faced, Rocky never backed down. And Blake wouldn't either. He felt that if a dog could hold its ground, then he, a soldier, a friend of David, certainly wouldn't give up either. With every step through the darkness, Blake felt his belief solidify. He thought about David, the years they had fought side by side, and the hardships they had overcome. Memories of David as a steadfast soldier, never quitting, always fighting to the end, now fueled Blake. He understood that nothing could stop his journey. He would never leave David behind, even if he had to face enemies within his own ranks. He would never let a friend, a comrade, suffer in silence and solitude. The unity in his team was also a key factor in strengthening his resolve. Every member of Blake's team had their role, but it was the bond and camaraderie that gave them an invisible strength, helping them get through each challenge. Blake knew that no one in his team would turn back, no matter the danger. They all believed that the truth about David Holt had to be uncovered, and they couldn't let it be hidden any longer. Blake felt that in every battle, the companions you had by your side were what determined success, and this time, he wasn't alone. However, what made Blake even more determined was the sense of betrayal he was facing. The feeling of being deceived by those he had once trusted drove him to act. He couldn't let this betrayal control him. Blake understood that every action he took wasn't just for David, but for his own conscience. He had to fight, not just for David Holt, but to preserve the values that the military had taught him, the values of loyalty and truth. This feeling of unwavering resolve and trust led Blake to a clear decision. He wouldn't stop. David Holt wasn't just a comrade. He was a part of the good things Blake had dedicated his life to protect. Every step, every new lead only strengthened Blake's resolve, even though he knew this journey would be anything but easy. Blake continued to investigate David's past, not only relying on military reports but also seeking out the stories from David himself. After several conversations, Blake began to understand more about what his comrade had endured in the dark years of captivity. David started to share his experiences of being imprisoned, a time when he felt completely abandoned, alone in the darkness, far from any support. Every night, David fought against nightmares of fallen comrades, failures, and betrayals that he couldn't fully comprehend. David's stories made Blake's heart ache. He spoke of those days in captivity, not just as a physical struggle, but as a battle within his soul. David recalled every cruel treatment, the unanswered questions that he couldn't explain. The loneliness and despair overwhelmed him as he realized not only had he lost his comrades, but his trust in the system he had once devoted his life to. Every time he saw Rocky, it was as if he found a small flicker of hope in the darkness, even though David often wondered how much longer he could endure. As Blake listened to David recount those painful memories, he began to see the scars on David more clearly. The wounds he carried weren't just physical, they were deep emotional scars. The feeling of being abandoned, the feeling that no one understood, and that there was no one to trust, was something David couldn't easily overcome. The stories of his torment in the darkness and the confrontations with betrayal from those he had once trusted were all pains he carried with him throughout the years of his captivity. Blake began to understand David more deeply, not just as a soldier, but as a person who had endured unimaginable pain, losses, and wounds that not everyone could comprehend. Blake realized that David's wounds weren't just physical, but were also psychological scars that perhaps only David truly felt. These wounds couldn't be healed by a simple investigation, but would take a long journey of understanding and healing. At that moment, Blake realized he didn't just want to uncover the truth about David Holt. He felt a responsibility to help David heal, to help him find his trust and hope again. Blake understood that in this fight, he wasn't just searching for those who had concealed David's survival, but also helping David overcome the ghosts of his past so he could live again, so he could find the peace he truly deserved. David's words not only made Blake more determined, but also opened a new path for him. David hadn't just been imprisoned physically, he had been trapped within those painful memories. Now, Blake understood that freeing David wasn't just about uncovering the truth about the military. It was about helping David escape from the psychological scars he had endured in the past. Blake listened as David continued to talk about the comrades he had once trusted, the ones who had hurt him deeply during their days of fighting. David began recounting the dark memories he had lived with during the war. The people he had called teammates, the ones he had trusted most, now turned out to be the ones who made him feel betrayed. David spoke about a particular battle during the Kashmir operation, when he and his team were ambushed. While the others were ordered to retreat, David and Rocky had to face the enemy, left behind without any support. David: At that moment, I thought everything would be fine, but no, we were left behind. The people I trusted the most abandoned us without a second thought. Rocky and I were the last to stay, and we had to fight alone. Blake listened, his heart heavy with what David had endured. Every word struck like a blow, each story unraveling the layers of betrayal, and Blake realized just how much David had suffered, not just physically, but emotionally, by those who were supposed to stand beside him until the end. Blake sat in silence, but he could feel the pain in David's voice. David continued, telling Blake that during the months of captivity, he had not only faced the loneliness, but had also witnessed the disloyalty within the military. He remembered encounters with old comrades, how they silently turned away, unable to look him in the eye. David felt abandoned, like a pawn in a game he couldn't understand. David: I just couldn't understand it. They said they'd come back, said they wouldn't leave me, but they did. I stayed, alone, with Rocky, but they only cared about themselves. They didn't see me. They didn't see me and Rocky, even though we fought until the end. Blake could feel the profound disappointment in David's words. The stories of disloyalty, of betrayal, were not just physical wounds but invisible scars deep within David's soul. The feeling of abandonment wasn't just a temporary emotion. It was a deep psychological wound, one that David couldn't erase, no matter how much time passed. David continued, recounting another painful event. He spoke of a comrade, someone he had fought alongside for years. David had once thought of him as his closest friend, someone he could trust in any situation. But during a dangerous mission, that comrade betrayed him, abandoning David at the most critical moment. David couldn't understand what had happened, but the pain he had to endure was unbearable. David: that feeling, I can't describe it. It was the first time I truly understood that sometimes people betray you for no clear reason. They just do it for their own gain. Blake felt David's pain as if he were experiencing it himself. Blake had faced enemies before, but what David had endured during his time in captivity, the betrayal from his own comrades, was far harder to overcome. Blake couldn't imagine what David had gone through. This made Blake realize that uncovering the truth wasn't just about solving a military case. It was about freeing David from the psychological wounds he had carried for so long. Blake listened intently, feeling the deep disappointment and exhaustion in David's soul. It wasn't just the betrayal from enemies. David had also faced something much worse: betrayal within his own ranks, from those he had trusted implicitly. Blake realized these wounds couldn't be healed by a simple investigation. What David needed wasn't just the truth, but a release from the ghosts of his past. David made Blake feel a tremendous sense of responsibility. He not only had to help David uncover the truth about the war and the betrayal within the military, but he also had to help him heal the deep emotional scars he had endured. David began sharing more about his dark days in the prison, when he was locked away with no help from anyone. He spoke of the struggle to maintain faith in himself. Those dark days felt like he was losing everything: his ideals, his comrades, and his hope for survival. Despair filled his heart as every day became a battle with himself. But through all of it, one image remained beside him: Rocky. Blake could feel the strength in David's words. Rocky wasn't just his companion in battle. He had been a lifeline, a symbol of hope when everything else seemed lost. The dog had been the constant presence, the only thing David could trust, even in the deepest moments of despair. And now, Blake knew that his journey wasn't just about finding the truth about David Holt. It was about giving David the chance to heal, to finally find peace after so many years of pain. Rocky wasn't just a dog. He was David's only true companion, the one he could trust without question. The dog didn't need words, didn't need grand gestures. Rocky's presence alone was all David needed. Whenever David felt himself on the brink of breaking, when he thought he couldn't endure another moment, Rocky was always there. With unwavering eyes and absolute loyalty, Rocky was the constant in David's chaotic world. David didn't need to say anything. A simple wag of the tail, the quiet presence of the dog, was enough to remind him that he wasn't alone. David remembered the long, sleepless nights, moments when he felt pushed into the darkest corner of the world. While everything around him seemed to crumble, Rocky was the only friend who never gave up. It was Rocky's loyalty that gave David a sliver of hope, enough to continue battling the ghosts in his mind. David began to realize that salvation didn't come from within himself, but from the loyalty and love of Rocky. This dog wasn't just a companion. He was David's truest friend, never leaving his side, even in his darkest moments. With Rocky, David began to rediscover his faith in life. Every time he looked into Rocky's eyes, he realized he wasn't alone. Rocky helped him remember the important values in life: loyalty, friendship, and an unbreakable hope. David no longer had to fight alone. He understood now that salvation could come from the most unexpected places, and Rocky was the symbol of that hope. Rocky's salvation wasn't just about his presence in David's life, but about the bond between the two: a human and a dog who had overcome every obstacle together. Rocky wasn't just a protector. He was the healer of David's soul, helping him find strength from within to keep going, refusing to let the wounds of the past haunt him or drag him down. David felt that he was no longer alone. With Rocky by his side, he had everything he needed to find peace within himself. Every day, he and his team continued to dig deeper into the secrets concealed within the military, not just to save David, but to uncover the truth about what happened during the Kashmir operation and the larger conspiracies hidden behind the distorted reports. With every new clue, Blake grew more certain that something was being hidden, and the truth about David was just a piece of a much larger conspiracy that he had yet to fully grasp. He couldn't trust the military's story. Too many details didn't add up. Too many reports were inexplicable. He felt these secrets weren't accidents, but the result of a deliberate strategy meant to protect those manipulating the military. After gathering a wide range of information from various sources, Blake and his team stumbled upon something that left them stunned. The reports of missing soldiers, not just David, were all manipulated. Reports were altered, crucial details erased, and even documents were destroyed. This proved that not only David but many other soldiers had been forgotten or intentionally concealed, their truth hidden. This revelation pushed Blake and his team into a perilous situation, realizing they were up against a much more complicated web of betrayal than they had ever imagined. One step at a time, Blake and his team followed the trail, reaching isolated areas and uncovering secret documents that the military had desperately tried to erase. These documents revealed that many of the missing soldiers had been illegally detained, and they weren't the heroes the military had claimed them to be. David was just one of many abandoned in a grand conspiracy designed to protect the powerful. Blake couldn't fathom how complicated things had become. He began to realize that this cover-up wasn't just about abuse of power. It was part of a larger effort to protect the dark interests that certain betrayers within the military were trying to preserve. A key detail left Blake stunned. An elite task force, including some of David's former comrades, was involved in manipulating the reports. Blake found the name of one of the men who had participated in the Kashmir operation and discovered that this person had been promoted while keeping the truth about those left behind hidden. They had used their power to enforce fake reports about David and the others in an attempt to keep the truth from coming to light. Blake was shaken by the realization that the military wasn't just a place for sacrifice and loyalty. It was also a breeding ground for betrayal and corruption. David's captivity wasn't a random accident. It was part of a larger strategy to cover up illegal actions committed by some within the military. Blake could hardly believe what he had uncovered. The truth was too complex, too dark. Every story David had shared now shone a light on things Blake had never imagined. David wasn't just a victim of war. He was part of a conspiracy by the very people he had once trusted. Blake understood that in order to free David, he had to face the people he never expected. Those traitors within the military were not only responsible for hiding David's survival, but they also had to answer for their actions. But in the midst of all this darkness, Blake realized something important. He couldn't stop now. He saw more clearly than ever that rescuing David wasn't just about delivering justice for a teammate. It was about opening the door to truth and justice within the military. He couldn't let this betrayal continue to dominate. Blake and his team had decided that they would fight to the end, not just for David, but for what was right and just. Blake knew that this battle wasn't just won between individuals. This was a war against powerful forces, people who had used their power to protect secrets too unimaginable to grasp. Blake and David were standing at a huge crossroads, facing a confrontation that not only involved external enemies, but also the betrayal within their own ranks. This confrontation began the moment Blake decided to directly confront those behind the concealment of David's survival. They had been hiding for years, but now, Blake and David couldn't allow the truth to remain buried any longer. The people who betrayed David, those who had not only left him to suffer in the darkness, but had also destroyed the trust within the entire military, would now face the very truth they had been trying to suppress. Blake and David walked into the room where the people they once called comrades were waiting. Standing before them were those who had fought side by side in the Kashmir operation. But now, those faces were no longer the friends David had once trusted. Blake could feel the tension in the air. This was more than just a confrontation between soldiers. It was a battle between betrayal and truth. David looked at the faces before him, and disappointment flooded his heart. The people he had once trusted, the ones he had fought beside, were now the traitors, the ones who had sold him and his fellow soldiers out. David couldn't comprehend it. He had once been a part of the military family, but now those within that family were the ones causing him this pain. David. Why? Why did you do this? We fought together, sacrificed together, and yet you left me behind? You betrayed me. Betrayed the very values we swore to protect. Blake stood beside David, feeling the tension rise in the air. David's words made the space feel suffocating. Blake wasn't just a companion. He was a witness to the pain David had endured. Every word, every question from David was like a strike at the people standing in front of them. Blake knew that they weren't just fighting to uncover the truth about David, but also to confront the betrayal within their own military ranks. The people across from them, though outwardly calm, began to show signs of unease in their eyes. David's accusations made it impossible for them to avoid the truth. But what shocked Blake most was when one of them, a man David had once considered his closest friend, stepped forward and lowered his head. He admitted everything. The soldier. We did it for personal gain. David wasn't the only one left behind. We had to make decisions we couldn't even imagine to protect ourselves and the system. But we were wrong. All of it was wrong. David didn't speak. He simply stared at his former comrade with empty eyes. These confessions didn't bring him any relief. David realized that the betrayal wasn't just the actions of a few individuals, but a coordinated strategy from a group within the military. These people had chosen their personal interests over protecting their comrades, over preserving the values the military was supposed to stand for. Blake couldn't help but feel stunned as he realized that everything was far more complicated than he had imagined. It wasn't just betrayal from enemies outside. It was betrayal from within his own ranks, from the very people Blake had once trusted. Now they had become the betrayers, the ones who had sold out everything the military represented. This confrontation wasn't just a fight with external enemies. It was a struggle with David's very self. He couldn't believe what he was facing. But part of him knew that, in order to free himself, he had to confront these truths. And to do that, he had to face the very people he once considered friends. Blake understood that this battle wasn't just about fighting for David. This was a war between loyalty and betrayal, between justice and concealment. This feeling, this turmoil in his heart, grew with each step forward. Blake couldn't believe that the military, the place he had dedicated his life to protect, hid such a vast network of betrayal. The people he had once called brothers, the ones who had fought beside him in war, were now the very ones he couldn't recognize. The questions kept swirling in Blake's mind, digging deeper and deeper. How could he understand that the comrades he had fought beside, the ones he trusted most, could betray him and David? Blake began to question the loyalty he had always respected. Was it just the empty values the military had taught him? Or was it something higher, a truth he had to protect at all costs? The years spent in the military were now becoming blurry memories. Blake couldn't imagine that the system he had dedicated his entire life to protect could have committed such cruelty. The shock hit him hard, leaving him feeling disoriented. A deep sense of disappointment flooded Blake's heart. He couldn't stop thinking about what had happened, about the betrayal no one had seen coming. How long had he trusted the values the military taught him? Loyalty, sacrifice for a higher purpose? But now those values were fading and shattering as he faced this dark truth. The people he had once trusted were now on the other side. They were the betrayers, the ones who had caused pain and loss for David and countless others. Blake began to doubt not only David, but himself. He wondered if he had been wrong to trust in the military, in those he thought could never fail him. Was his loyalty a mistake if everything he had fought for was no longer being protected? Blake struggled with the betrayal, not just from the enemy, but from his very own comrades. Each day, his disappointment grew deeper. He didn't know if he could continue fighting for what he once believed in, or if he could change everything he had learned and lived by. This feeling, this rising doubt, grew stronger in Blake's mind. He wasn't just facing David and the pain his comrade had endured, he was also confronting the very things he once held as truth in his life. Blake realized that David wasn't the only one facing betrayal. He himself was standing at the crossroads of a fight, not only with the enemy but with everything he had believed in within the military. He knew that, in order to resolve everything, he couldn't just battle the external enemies. He had to face the truth about those he had once called brothers. With each passing day, Blake grew more aware that this battle was far from easy. He wasn't just searching for David. He was searching to regain trust in himself, in the values he had spent his life protecting. Blake knew that as long as he kept moving forward, no matter the mental shocks he had to endure, he would have to confront the full weight of his discoveries. As Blake and his team neared the detention area, David and Rocky were still the comrades who hadn't been rescued. Blake couldn't stop thinking about all that had happened, the trials his team had faced, and whether David could still be alive to see the sun again. With each passing second, his heart raced, worried for David, but still hopeful that they would find him. Finally, after a series of intense searches, they were close to where David and Rocky had been kept. Just a few more minutes, and the moment Blake had been waiting for would come. As they passed through the cold stone walls, a soft sound broke the silence. Blake signaled for the team to stop. It wasn't a gunshot. It wasn't the sound of enemy footsteps. It was the familiar and warm sound of a tail wagging. Rocky. From within the restricted area, Rocky charged towards them, his strong body seeming weary, as if all his strength had been drained. His steps were powerful, decisive, and sure, without hesitation. In that moment, Blake saw David's eyes as Rocky ran toward him. It was a silent moment, filled with emotion. And then, like magic, David stood up with an unwavering determination. David couldn't contain his emotions. He stretched out his arms, and Rocky immediately ran to him, resting his head on David's lap. The dog nuzzled against David, wagging his tail in pure happiness, as if he had been waiting for this moment for so long. David gasped for breath, tears streaming down his face, but not from pain, from the reunion he thought he'd never get to experience again. Blake and his team witnessed this moment, feeling the miracle and release as David and Rocky finally reunited. Rocky's slow yet steady steps now felt like a reminder of an unbreakable resilience. David bent down, placed his hand on Rocky's back, and whispered softly, "David, we're back, buddy." Blake found himself choking back tears. In that moment, all the tension, all the battles, all the seemingly endless struggles faded away. What mattered most now was that David and Rocky had found each other. Reunion wasn't just about coming back physically, but the rebirth of trust, hope, and an inseparable friendship. David looked at Rocky, and once again, he felt the safety the dog brought. Rocky wasn't just a companion, but an irreplaceable part of his survival journey. David had not only found faith in himself again, but also rediscovered faith in the true values he had once protected. This dog had saved him in the darkest days, and now he brought him a new hope. David's heart felt lighter. The suffering from the past couldn't be erased, but he realized that he no longer had to fight alone. Rocky was the one true salvation he could trust, and now they were reunited, ready to step into a new chapter of life. Blake saw the clear change in David. He knew that this moment wasn't just a reunion between two companions. It was the first step in David's healing journey. He wasn't alone anymore. Not just Rocky, but now, Blake and his team would stand by David, helping him face the challenges ahead. David and Rocky had found each other, and that was the miracle everyone had been waiting for. David couldn't control his emotions as he saw Rocky. He reached out, and almost instinctively, Rocky leapt into his arms, sighing with relief, as if all the worries and exhaustion had melted away. David hugged Rocky tightly, feeling each breath, each joyful wag of the dog's tail. This moment wasn't just a reunion after so many long months apart. It was the resurrection of both a man and a dog, both of them overcoming the painful past they had endured. The dark years of imprisonment, the days left behind, the nightmares that haunted David's mind, now they could finally fade. Rocky was no longer just a fighting dog. He was the only light in David's life, the only thing that had kept him going through the darkest times. When David looked into Rocky's eyes, he saw the one thing that had allowed him to survive, the one strength that had kept him fighting when everything else seemed lost. Emotions surged within David. He had lost everything, his comrades, his faith in the military, and even in himself. But now, Rocky stood beside him, and that moment was the rebirth of everything David had lost. David realized that no matter how the world had changed, no matter how much pain he had endured, as long as Rocky was by his side, he could find peace again. This dog wasn't just a companion. He was the only family David had left. David held Rocky even tighter, as if to make sure he would never leave him again. At that moment, it was impossible for David to express the emotions flooding through him. The dark days, the loneliness, and the despair had followed him for so long. But now, with Rocky back at his side, David knew he didn't have to face this world alone anymore. Rocky had returned to save him, to show him that this friendship would never die. This wasn't just a simple reunion. It was salvation, both physically and emotionally. Blake watched as tears streamed down David's face. They were tears of joy, of liberation, and of resurrection. Blake couldn't help but feel moved by the sight. He knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, at least David wasn't alone anymore. He had Rocky by his side, and that was all he needed to keep moving forward, to not get lost in the old wounds. This moment wasn't just about the reunion between David and Rocky. It was the rebirth of trust, of love, and of a man who had once lost everything but now found the strength to start anew. This reunion wasn't just healing for David. It was a lesson in loyalty, in friendship that never fades, no matter how time or circumstances change. David felt the healing from Rocky, not just physically, but mentally. The first feeling when David embraced Rocky was a sense of peace that washed over him. The physical pain had begun to fade, but what David couldn't erase from his mind were the deep emotional wounds. He had endured countless sleepless nights, moments of hopelessness, and times when he thought he couldn't go on. But now, with Rocky back beside him, all he felt was warmth and comfort, the reassurance the dog brought. Rocky wasn't just a companion. He was the one who helped David get through the darkest nights during his months of captivity. Every time David felt like he was on the verge of breaking, every time he thought he couldn't endure any longer, Rocky was there, an invisible source of encouragement to help him stand up and keep fighting. Rocky was the only one David could trust completely in a world full of darkness and betrayal. This dog didn't just provide physical protection, he was a reflection of the resilience David needed. David realized he was no longer alone. Rocky was his salvation and the last hope in his life. No matter how bad the past had been, no matter how deep the wounds, as long as Rocky was by his side, David knew he could overcome anything. Rocky had been there in the darkest times, and now this dog would continue to be his companion in David's journey to healing. In that moment, David felt reborn. All the weight, the emotional scars, and the fear from the past seemed to melt away. He no longer felt bound by the painful memories. Instead, Rocky's presence was like a mental balm, helping him rediscover trust in life, in himself, and in the future. David no longer felt haunted by his past, no longer carried that sense of helplessness and loneliness. He understood that he could start anew, live a life without betrayal, without sorrow, only healing and hope. David made a decision that he would no longer let the past haunt him. He wouldn't let old wounds continue to overwhelm his soul. With Rocky by his side, David believed he could heal all the pain, not just physical, but emotional. He would begin a new life, a life no longer chained by the scars of his past. And in that journey, Rocky would be the irreplaceable companion, the greatest source of motivation to keep moving forward, never stopping, always rising. For far too long, David had lived in the darkness of the past, memories of war, betrayal, and the pain of fallen comrades. Every day he lived in anxiety, in torment, unable to escape the horrific images and feelings of abandonment. But now, standing before Rocky, he understood that there was no reason to remain shackled by the past. He needed a new beginning, a life where he wasn't a soldier, but a normal human being, someone who could live for himself and the people he loved. David no longer wanted to live in endless responsibilities, in the duties the military had placed on his shoulders. He didn't want to be a fighting tool, controlled by orders and the invisible forces of the system. He needed to find himself again, the person he had lost long ago. Rocky wasn't just his dog. He was the only companion in this journey of reclaiming peace. Rocky had never left him during the darkest years, and now David knew that together with Rocky, he could start anew, without being tormented by the past. David knew that this decision wouldn't be easy. Leaving the military wasn't just abandoning a job, a part of his life. It was abandoning a part of his identity. David had dedicated his whole life to the military, fighting to protect his country, to protect what he believed in. But now, he realized that if he didn't let go of the burdens of the past, he couldn't truly live authentically. He couldn't continue to live in the shadow of decisions made by others. That's why he needed to walk away, to bring about change in his life. Rocky was an essential part of this decision. David looked into Rocky's eyes, and he knew he wasn't alone anymore. Rocky would walk with him into a new life, one without war, without needless sacrifice. Only two companions, together overcoming challenges and seeking peace. This new life wouldn't be easy. David would face tough choices about leaving the military and protecting those he loved. He knew not everyone would understand his decision, and there would certainly be opposition from those within the military, those he had once called comrades. But David understood that this life was his, and he had the right to decide the path he would take. His decision wasn't just for himself, but for Rocky, for the people he loved, and for the values he had spent years fighting to protect. David looked ahead, no longer doubting. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he was ready. With Rocky by his side, he could face anything. He wouldn't let the past control him anymore. He would start fresh, reclaim his freedom, regain trust in himself, and most importantly, find the peace he had lost so long ago. David was no longer a soldier in the military. He was just a man, with Rocky as the one companion he couldn't live without on this new journey. David knew giving up the military wasn't an easy decision. It was a huge choice, one that could lead to losses he couldn't measure. He had devoted his entire life to the military. The years of training, fighting, the close comrades, those were all integral parts of who he was. The military system he had trusted for so many years now no longer felt like where he belonged. He no longer felt attached or found value in the things he had given up so much for. But David also knew that this decision might cost him a great deal. He would have to leave behind everything he had built. The comrades he once trusted, the ones who would never understand why he was leaving this life behind. And above all, David knew that leaving the military wasn't just about giving up a job. It was about giving up a part of his very identity. He had lived as a soldier, and now he had to face the truth. He would no longer be one. David knew this sacrifice wasn't just about leaving the military. It was about abandoning things he had believed in, loyalty, duty, his obligations to his country. But now he realized his greatest duty was to protect himself, to preserve the freedom and peace in his heart that he had lost all those years ago. David had to let go of the ideals he'd fought for his entire life to find himself again. He felt the inner conflict grow stronger. A part of him wanted to keep fighting for everything he had believed in, while another part of him knew he had to let it all go. The people in the military wouldn't understand. His comrades would never accept this decision. But David understood that no one could understand him the way he understood himself. And this decision wasn't just about leaving behind. It was about embarking on a new journey, a beginning he had to make. David was facing huge challenges as he chose to give up everything he had worked for. Leaving the military meant giving up all the security he'd once had. He would have to rebuild his life from scratch, without the protection of the military system, without the comrades who had always been ready to back him up. But David knew that no matter how hard it would be, this was the path he had to take. He couldn't keep living in the past. Standing at this crossroads, David couldn't help but think about Rocky. Rocky wasn't just a dog. He was the one driving force that kept David moving forward. This dog hadn't left his side through the toughest times. And now David knew that Rocky was all he needed to step into a new life. Not as a soldier, but as a free man who could live for himself. David felt the weight lift from his shoulders. He was ready to leave the past behind and step into a new future. All he needed now was Rocky by his side, the one companion he could trust, the strongest source of motivation to find peace within himself. This decision wasn't easy, but with Rocky, David felt that he could do it. David stood at the crossroads, weighed down by a decision that was anything but easy. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be smooth, but with Rocky by his side, he felt like he could face whatever came. He was no longer willing to let his past control him. It was time for a fresh start, to reclaim his freedom, to trust himself again, and most importantly, to find peace, the kind he hadn't felt in years. David wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was a man, with Rocky as the only constant in his life, the only companion he could rely on. Choosing to leave the military wasn't a simple decision. It was monumental, a shift that carried the weight of countless sacrifices. He'd given his life to the army, training, fighting, standing shoulder to shoulder with comrades. The military had been his family, a place where he found purpose and protection. But now, David realized, it was no longer where he belonged. The sense of connection he once felt had vanished. During the years he spent imprisoned, David saw the cracks in the system, the betrayal, the lies, and the sacrifice of the comrades he had trusted. These truths shattered him. He began questioning everything he had been taught. Was he fighting for a noble cause, or was he just a pawn in a game played by those in power? The more he thought about it, the more he felt like he was being pulled away from the ideals he once believed in. But despite all the pain, David couldn't ignore one simple truth. The military had taught him valuable lessons: loyalty, sacrifice, and the duty to protect the weak. He couldn't easily abandon those lessons. The betrayal didn't erase what he had learned. It simply made him question whether those lessons were still relevant in the world he lived in. David was torn, caught between continuing in the military, defending the legacy he had fought for, or walking away, seeking freedom and reclaiming himself. Each choice carried its own consequences. If he stayed, he'd face complicated relationships, restrained by the system and its responsibilities. But if he left, he'd lose the security, the protection, and the connections the army had given him for years. But then David realized something profound. All these years, he hadn't been living for himself. He had lived for ideals and responsibilities that others had imposed on him. Now, he needed to follow a path he truly believed in. He couldn't continue living under the shadow of the army, bound by duties he no longer felt connected to. So, David made the decision. He would leave the military and start fresh with Rocky by his side. It wasn't easy. Leaving behind everything he had known felt like stepping into the unknown. But he knew that if he didn't do it, he would never live an authentic life. Rocky, his steadfast companion, was the only friend he could trust. The one thing keeping him grounded, the motivation to move forward. David's new life wouldn't be about war or survival. It would be about walking a new path with Rocky, filled with challenges, but also hope. And though the road ahead was uncertain, David knew it was the right decision. Together, they had already overcome so much: trials, traps, dangers. And with Rocky by his side, he was ready to face whatever came next, not as a soldier, but as a man reclaiming his life. David and Rocky stood at the threshold of the most crucial mission of their lives, bringing the truth into the light and pushing back the betrayal within the military. They knew that this fight wasn't just about delivering justice for David, but about protecting innocent soldiers, giving those who had been forgotten and betrayed a chance at fairness. With Rocky by his side, David prepared for his final mission. Each step they took wasn't just a step into a new life, but also the fulfillment of a duty he had left behind. David felt the weight of responsibility pressing against his chest. This wasn't just about fighting for himself. It was about revealing the truths the military had tried to conceal. He wasn't a soldier in the army anymore, but he was determined to do whatever it took to help the others find justice. As they entered the area where they knew the crucial evidence was hidden, David felt everything becoming clearer. They had gathered confidential files, reports that had been tampered with, and traces of corruption within the military. The traitors would no longer escape punishment. David knew this battle wouldn't be easy, but he and Rocky had come too far to turn back. They couldn't stop now. David opened the file he had just found, reading every letter, every detail of illegal exchanges, hidden dealings, and names within the military that he never could have imagined. His heart sank as he realized that the comrades he had once trusted hadn't just betrayed him. They had betrayed everything the military stood for. The pain didn't just come from facing the betrayal. It came from recognizing that the names he had fought beside were now part of this dark conspiracy. Rocky stood beside him, as always, eyes sharp, ever vigilant. The dog was more than just a companion. He was an irreplaceable protector. In these tense moments, Rocky was the only comfort David had. He felt the strength inside him growing, the resolve to continue even though he knew this confrontation would be far from easy. But David understood that this was something he had to do. He couldn't let the betrayal persist. He couldn't let those traitors continue to manipulate everything in the shadows. With Rocky's support, David began to approach the authorities, sharing the evidence they had gathered. This was the most crucial step in their mission. The traitors within the military could no longer escape responsibility. David knew that exposing them wasn't just a victory for himself, but for everyone who had been deceived, for all those whose sacrifices had been disregarded. David's resilience and courage throughout this mission couldn't be ignored. He wasn't just facing enemies from the outside, but the painful truth about the people he had once trusted. And he was facing the consequences of that betrayal. But what made him stronger than ever before was Rocky. David couldn't have done this without his dog by his side. Every step they took wasn't just about completing a mission. It was a journey to restore justice and free those the military had betrayed. When David and Rocky completed this mission, they didn't just close a chapter in their lives. They opened a door to truth and justice. Though David knew this task had never been easy, with his bravery, he did something he once thought impossible. In that moment, as the final light pierced through the darkness of secrets that had been exposed, David felt a weight lift off his shoulders, like a burden had been removed. However, just as the feeling of victory began to wash over him, a deeper truth started to emerge within David. He realized that the sacrifices he had made weren't just in the heat of battle, but were a part of everyday life. Sacrifice wasn't always about grand victories or heroic battles. Sometimes it was about the hard decisions and choices we make in our daily lives. David began to understand that life couldn't always be measured by achievements, but by the tough and painful choices we have to make to move forward. As he walked through the years of turmoil, David realized how much he had sacrificed. It wasn't just the comrades he had lost, or the bloody battles fought, but also himself. David had given up so much to keep fighting, to live in a world where not everyone understood. He had once lived for ideals, for duty, for responsibility, and in that journey he had lost his faith in himself and the people he had once called brothers. David looked at Rocky, the companion not just in battle, but in the darkest moments of his life. Rocky's loyalty and love had become an irreplaceable part of David's journey. And David understood that the sacrifices he had made weren't for recognition or victory, but to find himself, to understand that sometimes sacrifice doesn't come from great battles, but from small decisions, those moments when we face the truth and overcome our own fears. He could feel a shift in his soul. The pain from the past, the memories of fierce battles, no longer defined who he was. David understood that life wouldn't always be smooth, but it was in those difficult challenges that he saw the true value of sacrifice. It wasn't about defeating enemies, but defeating himself, finding the strength to keep going when everything seemed hopeless. David realized that sacrifice was a process, not an end point, but a series of decisions that we must make. He understood that leaving the military wasn't abandoning his duty, but a rebirth of himself. No longer bound by the scars of his past, he could now look at life with a fresh perspective, full of hope. As he stood next to Rocky in this quiet moment, David felt that he had completed his mission. But this mission wasn't just about helping David find freedom. It was also about David freeing himself from the mental scars, the betrayals he had faced. He hadn't just survived, he had learned how to live fully, with sacrifice not as a burden, but as the motivation to rise. In the end, David realized that the greatest sacrifice he could make wasn't to continue fighting, but to learn how to live a life without betrayal, without the haunting past. David started to feel more deeply the inner strength that had always been there. Through the struggles, he had begun to realize that his sacrifices weren't just for Rocky, but for himself. He no longer saw himself as a tool of war, a soldier controlled by the system. He hadn't just fought to protect those around him, he had fought to find himself again. David began to understand that, despite the suffering he had endured, those wounds wouldn't drag him down. They were signs of strength, proof of his resilience, and a determination not to give up. David stood facing the future, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a profound shift inside himself. The weight of the past no longer burdened him. The mistakes he had made no longer haunted him. Every step, every decision now came from a foundation of growth and inner strength he had forged through the journey he had just completed. David realized that he alone had the power to shape his future, and no one, not even the betrayers or the pains of his past, could take that away from him. He looked at Rocky, his companion for all these years, the one who had stood by him, helping him get through the darkest moments of his life. Rocky wasn't just a dog. He was a symbol of true friendship, of loyalty without conditions. David understood that, while Rocky had been his source of strength, the dog was also a vital part of helping David discover his own inner power. David no longer depended on anyone. Not the military, not any organization, or even his old comrades. He had Rocky, and that was all he needed to move forward into a new life. David felt a strange kind of peace. He finally understood that what he needed to do now wasn't to keep fighting, but to live a life worthy of everything he had endured. He had to live true to himself, not out of obligation or responsibility to anyone, but for himself and the values he had discovered deep within. David made the decision not to let the past affect his future anymore. He would no longer allow painful memories of war and betrayal to cloud his hope for a new life. He looked at Rocky and smiled, filled with resolve. He knew things wouldn't be easy, but with the inner strength he had just uncovered, nothing could stop him. He had been a soldier, but now he was a man determined to live for himself, to live with the courage and freedom he had reclaimed. In that moment, David understood that strength didn't just come from defeating external enemies. It came from facing the very things he had once avoided. David was no longer a soldier in the army. He no longer had to confront life-or-death decisions every day. His life now was defined by simpler things, moments he had never had the chance to experience before. Rocky was still by his side, his irreplaceable companion in this new life. The dog wasn't just a loyal friend. He was a symbol of everything David had overcome, the trials, the pain, and the betrayal. The peace David found wasn't a silence. It was the quiet comfort of knowing he no longer had to fight. The days of being trapped, the sleepless nights, the nightmares that seemed endless, were now behind him. He lived in the serenity Rocky brought, and that was the precious gift he had earned after all the years of suffering. Every morning when he woke up, David felt the stability that had eluded him for so long. Each step in this new life was no longer a battle. He didn't have to brace himself against the past anymore. Instead, he learned to accept, to let go, and to live with what the present had to offer. David learned to heal from the wounds of his past, not just with time, but through Rocky's companionship. Every time he looked into Rocky's eyes, he understood that he wasn't facing this world alone. The dog had always been there during the darkest moments, and now he was still the only one David could trust completely. David's new life wasn't easy, but with Rocky by his side, he knew he could overcome anything. The memories of war and betrayal no longer had the power to hold him back. David realized that peace wasn't the absence of challenges. It was the ability to face them head-on, to accept them, and move forward even though the road ahead was filled with the unknown. Together with Rocky, David started building a new life. He no longer had to hide his feelings or fear what had happened in the past. David could finally breathe easy, living in the ordinary moments he had once longed for. The past couldn't be changed, but he found a sense of peace within himself, a place where betrayal, war, and endless pain no longer haunted him. Rocky wasn't just a dog. He was David's companion in every trial he faced. The dog was always by his side, through the highs and the lows, offering silent support and providing the strength to overcome every obstacle. With Rocky, David began to understand that life could be simple, yet full, that he didn't need to fight against the past but could simply live in the present. The bond between him and Rocky wasn't just a friendship. It was a symbol of sacrifice and unconditional loyalty. The dog might never speak a word, but in every glance and every action, Rocky conveyed one powerful message. David would never have to face this journey alone. Friendship, sacrifice, and trust, these were the things that had helped them both endure, and that was their true strength. Through all the trials, pain, and loss, David learned that sometimes sacrifice didn't come from fighting for a great cause, but from being willing to do anything to protect the ones you love, to protect the relationships that matter most. And in this new life, Rocky was the embodiment of that truth. The dog didn't just help David survive the storms inside. He was his friend, his teacher, showing him resilience, forgiveness, and loyalty. David understood that no matter how tough life got, he and Rocky could face it together. They no longer had to face external enemies or the pain of the past. Instead, they were building a new future together. A future where friendship and sacrifice were the solid foundation. David found his belief in life again, not through grand victories, but through the quiet moments with Rocky, through being grateful for what he had, and through taking each step forward, no matter the challenges ahead. Belief in the future, love, and sacrifice became the strength they carried with them. David realized that even when he felt tired, sometimes just having a true companion like Rocky by his side meant he would never feel left behind. Rocky had helped him heal, not just physically but mentally. David learned that there was nothing more valuable than a loyal companion and a simple life no longer ruled by the past. Life wasn't always easy, but with Rocky beside him, David knew they could face whatever came next. That was the message he wanted to share with the world, that true strength comes from connection, from the relationships we nurture, and from the courage to keep going, no matter how harsh life gets. Sacrifice wasn't always about fighting battles. Sometimes it was about standing beside your friend, loving, and protecting what mattered most. David and Rocky found peace in their new life, but more than that, they discovered that, in the end, it's love and sacrifice that make life whole. David looked at Rocky, feeling peace settle within him. Every day, he cherished the simple moments with his dog more. No more battles, no more haunting memories of the past, just the steady presence of Rocky, the companion he knew would never leave his side. David realized that life now had real meaning. He no longer lived in fear of the past, no longer had to run from the painful memories of war and betrayal. Each day he woke up, he wasn't worried about what would come next. Instead, he felt a quiet peace with every breath, every shared moment with Rocky. He knew that the simplest things in life were the greatest gifts he had. The past no longer haunted him. The sleepless nights, the hopeless moments, seemed to have melted away in the air of freedom and calm. David didn't feel burdened by his old wounds anymore. He had learned to live in the present, to appreciate each moment, every second shared with Rocky. He knew he didn't have to fight the past anymore, that he didn't have to live in the shadow of what had been. He had healed, not just with time, but with the love and loyalty Rocky had shown him. David realized that no matter how hard life got, he didn't feel alone anymore. Rocky was his motivation to keep moving forward, always by his side, never abandoning him. David understood that healing doesn't always come from distant places. It can come from those closest to us, from sincere feelings, and from accepting what has happened. He didn't need to change the past. All he needed to do was live in the present and make it better. David's new life wasn't a fight anymore. He wasn't facing grand battles from the army or enemies outside. He was facing himself, the mental scars he had carried for years. But with Rocky, everything felt lighter. David no longer felt the weight of pressure or burden. All he needed was to live true to himself. And with Rocky, he found peace in every moment they shared. Every time David sat down, Rocky would come to him, resting his head on David's lap, as if to say, "We've made it through and now it's time to enjoy these moments." That was the comfort David needed. No words, just Rocky's presence. David realized that nothing was more important than living in the moment, finding joy in the simplest things, like a peaceful morning with Rocky or a walk in the park. David began to understand that every moment with Rocky was a gift, and he would never let it go to waste. He no longer faced the fear of the future because, with Rocky, he had everything. The story of David and Rocky wasn't just about overcoming suffering. It was a testament to the power of friendship, loyalty, and healing. No matter how the world changed, they had found peace in the simplest moments. David no longer had to confront the painful past. Together, he and Rocky had started a new life full of hope and love. Their friendship had helped them overcome every challenge, and that was the greatest strength they could ever have, were a testament to the quiet strength of friendship. No matter how challenging the path ahead, they always had each other. Their bond was the anchor that kept them steady through the toughest storms. And if you can feel the power and hope in their story, don't hesitate to share this video with those you care about. Let this story spread a message about the beauty of friendship, sacrifice, and loyalty in life. We all have the power to find peace. We just need to cherish the moments we share with those we love. Drop your thoughts in the comments, and let's share our faith in a brighter tomorrow.